Okay, we are gonna call to order this meeting of the Town of Maynard Planning Board. It is Wednesday, August 16th. In Town Hall, room 101. We are missing Samantha Elliott, but everyone else from the board is present. So, excuse me, before we go to the main order of business, let's take a look at the minutes. I see, I'm in a mess of paper here. There are two
I revised them.
two sets of minutes?
I see two.
Okay.
Two sets of minutes, and I didn't give you the sanitized set, but she did make, rather, she's big on those tenses. And so she did the 23rd, and I did go over these myself as well, because for these I know that they've been a little lengthy.
So we have comments from Sam. I mean, have you read them? Is there anything substantive?
Yeah, I did. Oh, Sam's?
Yes.
No. She's, they look better after she does them.
Sure.
There's a few things, largely editorial. Matter of fact, I wouldn't say entirely editorial, but they're good, they're very good comments.
Okay. Any final comments on the minutes?
None. No comments whatsoever.
So I'd like to move that we accept the minutes from May 9th, 2017, and May 23rd, 2017, incorporating the edits from Samantha Elliott as provided to Bill. I'm sorry.
Second.
All in favor? That's
Yep.
five in favor.
Okay.
Minutes.
You'll notice that,
For posterity.
Chair, you're given tomorrow night's agenda, which doesn't, we don't have a meeting exist.
Last night's
Yeah.
agenda?
No, tomorrow.
This is the 17th agenda.
Yeah, the correct one is
Got it.
placed over there, yeah. So, but it's the same thing, so.
Thank you.
I think without town council, before she comes, I can tell you about, I made the modifications on the findings that I just put in front of you. There was a number of changes last night, the elimination of master sign plan, a couple other additions. The most significant ones that I'd like to run over, because we never really got to them last night, and if you go to the findings for...
I haven't opened, do we need to, I don't need to open anything anymore, right?
No, it's just deliberations.
Got it. Sorry.
If you look at the parking waiver plan, the parking waiver page, Barbara had suggested that I flesh out a little bit about what the parking waivers were, which you see on the top, just so you're all familiar with what the waivers were for. And there's also, when we grant relief from parking standards, we should say, we should have these two additional items. We should have a finding that we meet those, and it's a demonstration by the applicant that there's no possible way to provide a parking requirement, or that doing so would render the project infeasible. So that was one that I added in there. These are, she felt that we should add this in there as well, and I agree. And I gave a finding there so that the board might want to just look at. And if you remember, the reason we did the parking standards, the waiver from parking standards, was because we wanted to add that increased setback in the front, the yard space. So what I had crafted there was basically that in order to meet those requirements, the project in that configuration wasn't able to provide the amount of parking, and that's the reason for it. So that's one change. So if there's anything you guys are not comfortable with that, I can.
So maybe we can just talk broadly about tonight.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I mean, are we okay?
About process?
Sure. Whatever.
Yes, I mean, I guess, my question, Bill, was that, and I'll back up and say that town council's provided me with a script for the voting. Hopefully that will help. There's a lot to it, but it's, all the things we have to say, and this relates to the statement of findings, which relates to the document that you just passed out. Now,
And I have a little more to tag on it after you're done.
well, I guess I was wondering if we accept this document, or if we're reading the findings into the record.
No, I would, let's see how Barbara thinks. I'm
Yeah.
guessing that she's gonna want it read into the record.
Do we actually have to read it into the record, or can we just say enter into the record?
I don't know. Well, that's Barbara, she'll be there in a
Because
second.
in most
Okay.
circumstances, you can say that, and then you don't have to actually sit there and read whatever it is.
Well, the thing is, you could say as provided on the draft document, and I'm gonna incorporate that. This is gonna be incorporated into the decision. So,
This document, the findings
no,
document.
not the document itself, but if you look at the decision, I put, like, I put each criteria.
So
and then
there's
I
a
just
space
put-
where you'll insert this text
Exactly.
into the decision.
Exactly. And,
Same thing.
Yeah, same thing. Okay,
and,
so we'll confirm that with council. My, memory, I guess, of where we left off. We were in the midst of discussing or reviewing the additional recommended VHB conditions that need to be added to the decision.
yes.
Right? That's one item that still needs to
Yes.
be closed out. We also had discussed the possibility of marching through the conditions of approval briefly or,
Yes.
succinctly. We'd also discussed that members of the board have an opportunity to provide their hot button items,
Yes.
and which I'm very willing to listen to, and we can, gravitate towards those first. But, so that's 1, 2, 3 things to tackle minimally. And then, let's just review, because I know that with, my understanding on internal illumination is that we've debated it and we're kicking that to a vote. That there might be, we can still discuss that, but there were two possible, the board is likely to pursue accepting the condition, the special permit, but it's just the conditions of that we'd like to accept, which might vary. We did accept the 32, the change to the 32 square foot on the tier 3. And I'm kind of reviewing Sam's email as an outline, but the last concern was about the hours of operation or hours of delivery, and I believe we left that where it was, with the exception of, I think, expanding one of the windows for the frozen food, I think, grocery and frozen food, to allow for
So, just so,
broader delivery times.
what I
Did we
changed,
move that to 10 a.m.?
10,
Yes.
that's what I have in my notes.
Yes.
10
on,
a.m.
on Sam's, I had a question mark, so did the board decide that they wanted to go from 45 square feet to,
Yes.
was it 30?
32.
32.
Okay, so that one I'm gonna add. And, okay. Let's see, hi.
So I'll wait, I can start explaining and then council and applicant will return. I don't opportunity to raise the subject that we've been discussing?
No, did not.
Okay, so, the 53G account, which is out of which the board's consultants are paid, which includes council, it includes Wayne, it includes Stantec, it includes, VHP. So that account is depleted, and there is a bill for possibly $63,000, that's due. The applicant through council has a check for $56,000 of that amount with him today, which he will, I'm advised, give to the town planner. The remaining approximately $7,000 or $8,000 of that bill, Angelo assured me as an attorney that that amount would be, that check would be cut tomorrow and brought to town hall. So that takes care of the outstanding bill. I accept Angelo's word as an attorney that he will carry that out. The second part of this is that there have been, there's been time spent, so amounts accrued by consultants, including the town engineer, council. We're not sure, possibly Stantec, but we're not sure, and we estimate that it is in the amount of approximately $40,000. So we've had discussion with counsel for the applicant throughout the day today, and just now, and what we've agreed is that the applicant will bring a check for $40,000 next week, and I would just like an assurance on the record verbally from council that that will happen, that next week. The applicant has requested a meeting with the town engineer and just some explanation, some estimate of what that amount reflects, the $40,000, which we don't typically do before the invoice is issued, but certainly as a courtesy and to move things along so that the board can do its job, I've agreed to that. So we will prepare a sort of estimate of what our hours are. The town engineer has graciously agreed as a courtesy to meet with the applicant on Tuesday to discuss that, but I just want to make it very clear, the $40,000 by check is due to the town next week. The meeting is a courtesy, there's no contingency involved in this whatsoever, so I would just like a brief statement from applicant or applicant's counsel that they agree to everything that I just said.
Yes, so that a meeting will take place between town engineer and the applicant on or about Tuesday to discuss the Stantec billing as well as subsequent
Wait,
billings.
you can discuss it, but I just want to make very clear, I just want a representation from you on the record that you or your client will have a check for $40,000
Yes.
next week.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And that,
We're in agreement.
okay, and that tomorrow, there will be a check for the balance due, the $7,000 or $8,000, you'll have a check tomorrow to town hall.
Yes, we're in agreement.
Okay, so then perhaps we could have the ceremonial passing of the $56,000 check to the town planner. Sorry.
Big check.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that satisfies my concerns. And the importance of this is that I need to let the board do its job. The board's worked very hard so far, and last night made substantial progress on considering the merits of all these applications. And so now I feel comfortable that the board is in a position to do its job. So thank you for your patience, and to applicant and applicant's counsel for resolving this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you for my work.
Sure, thank you.
All right. Well, let's see.
Sure, thank you.
We were talking about the change to the delivery hour.
Did we finish going through the engineer comments?
No.
Okay.
Let's do that. And then let's end back at the findings and have our conversation about how that's transferred into the decision. So, I think we had, there was, so we were at least down to bullet 6 on additional recommended VHP conditions. And I think we were at the point where we were all kind of skimming quickly and raising hands if anything sticks out.
And while while the board is doing that, can I just ask, as sort of a technical matter, assuming that the board agrees to these or agrees to these as modified during discussion, will we be making these additional conditions in the permit decision?
I think the intent is that these are additional conditions
Conditions,
in
okay.
the decision.
In the decision, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The first bullet on the, I guess, last page, Wayne, question, if warranted by field conditions observed by the town during construction. So there's an assumption made about how deep you needed to go, and you can't tell until you get down
We
there.
had quite a debate with the off-site roadway engineer about the limits of full depth pavement, and rather than get back and forth too much, we just said, you know what? During construction, if we're not happy with what we see, you're gonna have to expand the limits, and that's all this is.
And I assume that this inspection of this is coordinated with your other condition that outlines the different inspection points that you intend to
Yes, it is.
witness?
Yes.
Deliveries to the site will adhere to time periods outlined in the summary of property management services. Where am I?
Which is the same one that I'm doing.
Does this
isn't
refer
it?
to the O&M?
I think it does, table one. I don't have it handy, but I thought that's what that was referring to. I mean, but based on the comment you made earlier about a potential suggested condition, it may trump that. So whatever the board and you decide is fine.
Okay.
So that's different from the table one that's referenced in the previous two bullets. There's a lot of
On
reference to
table-
table one.
Walkthrough table.
Yeah, I apologize, I don't have that table one handy. I thought it was in the O and M plan.
Yeah, it's just a minor thing, but it seems that it's in the O and M. I mean, maybe we just clean up the reference between this. I mean, if it's even needed, I don't know if this condition is really needed.
It may
Because
not
we're gonna
be based
include
on comments that Bob made earlier.
I think it'll be, whatever the board agrees on, any
Yeah.
modifications to the O and M will be called out specifically.
Based on the discussion you guys, I'm sorry, Bob,
Yeah.
based on the discussion you guys made last night, I respectfully withdraw that recommendation. How's that?
So, question, if you have these, these are, we've, I think, accepted the rest of them with some modifications, but council and Bill will sort these into the categories, I guess, of the different conditions in the,
That would be my understanding.
okay.
Yes, I mean, they may be moved, they'll be placed in the appropriate place in the decisions.
Okay.
That's-
It's likely, I think we mentioned before, that in some cases, I mean, there's probably gonna be some wordsmithing, nothing of the essence would change, but we found, there's little typos and stuff like
So
that.
a few
obviously.
references that were incorrect, et cetera, that's all.
Right, right.
Did you have another question about?
No.
Okay.
No.
Any last questions about the engineering comments or proposed conditions? Okay. So, O and M down. Engineers' comments down. Does anyone wanna offer any hot button issues before we dive into the conditions of approval? And when I say dive, I mean shallow dive. Skim. So no, okay. So with that said, maybe I'll do kind of an abbreviated version of what Attorney Catanzaro did last time, where he kind of, with my guidance or leading, we'll just go section by section. If people have anything, raise your hands. Section A, that all seemed pretty straightforward. Section B, local requirements, straightforward. C and D, those are lifted pretty much from MOA. Management documents, 18, it looks like, is really what ties us to the O and M. And then I assume, would this condition be modified, or would there be an additional one slid in there with the changes?
I'm afraid I don't know where you are.
Sorry, page 15, condition 18. This is the draft decision.
Yeah, okay, so, what I'm gonna recommend for this is that, we will tinker with that language, but we'll say the O and M plan is modified as follows, and we'll list all the changes there, that the board's discussed, some of which the board has concluded its discussion, and I think there's still a few open ones to finish discussing. And then we're, to add a condition in the permit, the applicant shall revise the O and M plan to conform to this decision and shall, following inspection of the amended O and M by council, record the amended O and M with the decision. So I think that way it will capture everything that needs to be captured.
Okay,
That would be the same condition? Right at the end, right? Or is it a new condition?
I had, it'll take a little bit
Are you
of
gonna-
tinkering,
Alright.
but I will,
Will you tinker now?
we will tinker. I mean, we're not gonna change the substance, but it's really, the heart of it is whatever changes the board has agreed and is going to agree to change the O and M plan. And
Okay.
it'd probably be worth kind of recapping what those changes are, just to make sure that you have that straight.
we can do a quick rehash.
Recap, yep.
Okay, moving on to F.
I have
Condition-
one. Oh,
Yep.
sorry.
Mhm.
I remember on number 20,
Mhm.
I remember talking about doing some digital copies. Do you remember that? Or was that on this one?
Yeah, wasn't there a change
Yeah,
to
but
go
it
to
just hasn't made
five
it to the
sets or?
draft.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Yeah,
We
I
definitely
feel like I have a
changed that. We
couple
did
of
change
comments
that.
that
Yeah, we said 5.
might be in that category.
Just that
How
they
come that
haven't
didn't get,
Fair
redone
enough,
the
fair
draft.
Yeah, that one,
I don't know, so can you remind me what the change
it
was?
was 5 copies.
5
and
full-scale sets?
What did we say, 10 CDs?
Yeah,
Bill,
yeah.
From memory?
yeah, 10 CDs and 5, yeah.
Okay.
And what I had discussed, was that, with the applicant, because it's a lengthy 60-page or whatever.
Okay.
What we would do is, assuming the board approved everything,
Mhm.
the Mylars would be signed by the board, and then the applicant would scan the Mylars and create prints with the executed, plan, of the executed plan. So it's a little bit more efficient the way we're trying to do that. And I think that was what the applicant agreed to. It kind of saves everybody time, money, and I think it'd be an efficient way to do it. Do you agree, Barbara?
Yeah, oh, sure, it's whatever,
And Bob, you and I think we discussed how that would make sense. So you take that and then just scan us the others and print it, so.
Yeah.
So that'll be better. And I made that change.
Okay, so cruising down, anything else on this page? Okay. Page 17. There's our 28.
yeah, 28, I'd have to look, but whatever was the most recent version that you looked at the other day,
That's it was an additional handout, so
correct,
really
so that
the-
supersedes this.
got it.
Okay.
The 33% is still the same, but there's language that's.
Language
The
has
whole-
changed.
Yeah, it's
but-
completely changed.
Okay.
You can strike that.
We, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that we did talk about it last time,
Correct.
but if you have, any further comments.
On number 26, I
Yeah.
recall that there was, we were going through the draft with the applicant, in one of our previous meetings. They hadn't actually obtained all permits, but they were to provide proof of applying, of having applied for the permits. Was that,
Yeah, I'm not sure
There was-
why those changes aren't in this version, but we did change that stuff. We met with the applicant and we edited that. And you're right, but it was proof of application.
right?
Proof of application, so permits or where appropriate, proof of
We
application.
agree on specific language,
Okay.
and I
Right.
just, I
Yeah,
don't
I
have that
don't-
with me.
We'll just look real quick. Engineering comments with special counsel changes, that's for the final 28. Is. Okay.
27, I'm just looking through my notes from when we did go through that, just to make sure. On 27, we had talked about the height of the retaining wall and the height of the fence, making sure that those were correctly noted on the plans.
That's right.
Yep.
Was it around that, was that discussion around this condition in particular, or, because I remember there was discussion of not just indicating the height of it, but just ensuring that it was in fact that height, so that was
Right.
tied to this condition?
It was discussion around condition 27.
Okay.
The approved site plans. Do we feel that I mean, it sounds like there's concern that the intent is not captured. Right? So that, in other words, is it
Well-
a substantive matter
I guess,
or just a clerical?
I think, and based also on comments from the public, it's where there's a question of, the plans show a height, a particular height, indicate a particular height of the fences, but there was some discussion of whether, just because of the topography, those fences will in fact be 12 feet at the location, at the locations
Yeah,
provided.
or the 6 foot
Right,
retaining wall, yeah.
So to that extent, it is a substantive issue, to which I'll defer to staff on sort of what, and the board, what the board wants substantively, but that if there's any further language to put in, we can put it in this condition.
Well, right. And when I looked at the plans last time, I saw a wall that is really, 200 feet long or something like that, and it is not 6 feet tall the entire length. It varies from, probably 0 or a foot to 6, and kind of undulates up and down. I think the top of it's level, but, so it's, I guess, in my mind, what I saw on the plan was an appropriate design.
Right.
Whether or not that meets what was promised, I guess, and I don't know in what form that was promised or in what form that was expressed. I guess that's another question.
So, I guess that can be another condition, that the fence as constructed shall be, and then I'd need help with the wordsmithing on this, but shall be 6 feet at all points. I don't know, I'm breaking down, the language is breaking down here, but I think that's what the board, is that what?
That's what we could do. Well, I don't know,
I thought we were just discussing, it was limited to the section that wasn't 12 foot behind one of the abutters' house.
Well, sorry.
There's two different.
Two issues. There's the fence and the wall. The fence, in my understanding, there was an issue, I think a clerical issue on the plans. There was the landscape plan, the civil plan. Civil plan controls, we should look at that and just confirm it should be a 12-foot fence, and that's gonna just be 12 feet tall, and it's, I think, pretty straightforward. The wall is a different story, because I don't think there's a legitimate reason to make that wall 6 feet tall the entire length. It just doesn't work that way.
It would look crazy.
It sounds like none of us might have been privy to a discussion with the property owner and applicant, which potentially that was discussed. I don't know if any of us know the answer to that. But that's what I think that's what the person in the audience alluded to.
I'm just gonna look and see.
Right, does that ring a bell?
I do not recall in this forum a commitment or a discussion about that wall
No, I
being
think
of a
that's what
certain
they
height.
said, is that it had been promised to be 6 feet or something like that.
Right.
I'm not sure any of us know that was true, but that's what I think we were told.
So I'm gonna look through residents' comments to see if I can find something, if the board wants to move on while I look for that.
I believe it is mentioned in passing in that
I
document.
thought it was, but
Bill, do you have a copy of the engineering plans? Like behind you over there? maybe Brent.
There you go.
Okay, perfect, so I'll just, and we can review, let's see.
Maybe that page 7. You just have plans?
Where?
Sure. Carol,
So. Top of wall 2025, top of wall 206, so that wall slopes. Top of wall 207.75, so then it slopes again, but rather shallowly.
The reference in, to Barbara's point, the reference in the abutters comment, when I glanced through it, I didn't really digest it, but I'm not actually sure. I guess the board should hear it, but I'm not actually sure it makes sense. It's kind of to the point you're going, Greg. So also, as pointed out at the meeting last week, the specs, which is not appropriate, the retaining wall in the current site plan does not conform to the specification on the landscape plan that was approved at town meeting. The landscape plan that was approved at town meeting wasn't a design plan, so if it said wall 20 feet high and it was determined to be 2 feet high during the design, it should be 2 feet high. So I'm not actually sure that that comment from the abutter really makes a lot of sense. They're referencing a concept plan that had no design criteria in it, other than a pretty picture on a single plane horizontal viewing surface. If Greg's looking at a plan, and I haven't flipped through it yet, but if he's looking at a plan and the grading looks appropriate for that wall, we should go with the grading that's appropriate for that wall. We're not gonna, I wouldn't recommend we construct a 6-foot wall if you don't need to construct a 6-foot wall and it's gonna look out of place. The fence is a different issue. The wall is for grading purposes. Does that make sense?
The wall is there to, create an appropriate gradient to plant on, right? So they
I would think so,
which
yeah.
is the buffer, so to enable the buffer,
Which
right?
sheet are you on, Greg?
I'm on 16. There's one property that's what we're looking at, and, the wall responds to that property.
The intent of that
You
wall,
know?
right? The intent of that wall, I'm trying to find it, you've got an edge of road, the parking area, right? That wall is about 6 foot behind that, I don't know if you guys are looking at it or not, but all that wall is doing is holding back that slope.
Right.
It needs to be the height, it needs to be to hold
Retaining
back that slope. And as a matter of fact, and I mean no disrespect to the person that was talking about this, this is a big hill from these people's house coming down into the site. You're not even gonna see that wall,
No.
because it's gonna be at the bottom of a slope. And there's a fence that you have to climb over on top of or something to even look down there.
So
I personally, I recommend that you really ignore that
Just leave it
comment,
alone.
because it just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
I mean, just for I guess folks' reference, I mean, it basically, on the east side, it starts at 0. It's
Yep.
0 feet tall. It rises abruptly to 3.5 feet
Yeah,
tall,
right. Yep,
and then rises again more slowly to 5 3/4 feet tall,
and then
and
down
then
to 0.
falls again back to 0.
Yeah, which is appropriate to hold back that slope.
Okay. And then, in addition, obviously, there's the buffer planting and the fence, which go uphill from that, the way that we've seen.
I think in the abutters defense, I just don't think that they understood what they were looking at from an engineering perspective. I don't think they realized that nobody was trying to shortchange them. It's just what was shown in the concept plan as, let's say it said 6-foot wall. That's not what was necessary.
I mean, in reality too, we shouldn't, I don't think you would recommend the creation, especially unnecessarily, of a wall in excess of 6 feet
Absolutely not.
for safety concerns.
There's other criteria that comes when it gets over 4 feet, it gets,
When would you need a security fence
you
and all
need a
that stuff?
fence on top of it, correct.
Okay. So, as designed. How did we get into that?
Sorry.
Number 27.
It was my
Brett's
fault.
fault.
No, it's better to talk about it now, right?
Just trying to remember where we were so we can get back to it.
Yeah.
That's all. That was 27. Got it.
Well, we've already done 28, right?
No, we are done with 28, I think.
Yes.
I assume we're done. We talked about it yesterday. We're done. Okay. So we'll move on to G. We're gonna head to G. I'm sure it's okay. Let's see. G is kind of a litany of stuff. Copy of the building permit layout plans, detailed utility plans, and then the last one was, sorry, this is precedent to making application for building permit. All required landscaping, I know we talked about this yesterday, fencing and related improvements. So this is the insurance that the buffers are completed before any building permits are filed. And these are building permits for buildings, obviously not for the infrastructure, roadways, and, yeah, got it. Okay, H. Pre-construction meeting. Let's see. So Wayne, you're happy with this pre-construction meeting language of 30, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. This is 32 is construction activity hours. We should definitely touch on that one. 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Saturday 9 to 6. That's 7 to 6, 9 to 6. Sunday nothing. That's what it's saying.
7 to 6, Monday to Friday, 9 to 6, Saturday.
That's, yeah.
That's pretty typical industry standard.
I guess, the no construction activity whatsoever on Sunday, I think the way we've worded that before was that nothing involving, any noise generated, but I mean, so people were doing, we tried to be
Sure,
reasonable.
survey or
Right,
Yeah.
inspections or whatever.
yeah, there was a really good condition that the board came up with on, recent one, but it was essentially that, you know, any work with noise generation or anything like that was not in place.
Did we already tweak this? We tweaked this already in the
When you're
in the
discussing
open
the O and
hearing.
M,
Yeah, I think. I'm just remembering. I'm trying to remember
I
if
think
we've
there's a
already
10.
if this already if this already kind of captures our thoughts, or I don't know if we can have further thoughts, but we're on 32.
Yeah, construction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did we?
well, for, trash pickup, the board modified that.
Yeah, I don't feel like we did construction hours
No.
in the O&M.
We're talking
Not
trash.
construction.
That
Right.
is-
Trash was
Right.
changed Monday to Friday, 6:30 to 6, Saturday 8 AM to 6 PM. That's what I have.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Right. I guess I was hearkening back to like a while ago. I
And
felt
there were
like
some public comments around the construction time.
oh, certainly.
Yeah, they wanted to limit it, you know, to no holidays, no shorter window for construction opportunities,
And
later starts on weekdays and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I guess should consider that for a second. There was a proposal for, you know, putting federal holidays in here, which, you know, we'd have to, I don't know.
I mean,
Is there any interest in any of that?
I think this is pretty much, Wayne said, it's industry standard. I mean, it's not like it's going to be continuous, nonstop construction right at 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Maybe, you know, for a while, but there's gotta be some flexibility for crews to come in, crews to leave. and things of that nature. You just can't limit it. And quite frankly, I'd like to see the project commence and get done as quickly as possible. If it gets cessation of work during holidays and whatnot, that'll just delay things even further.
So, construction, I mean, just to define it, I guess, crews can arrive and be there and, but I'm sort of asking the question.
You mean, how are we defining construction?
Well, I mean,
Jackhammers at
they
7
can,
a.m.
they can be there on site prior, but I don't know, and, I mean, what have you seen in the past, or, you know, I know there's, an enforcement aspect to this too, but, we're saying that they can't, you know, begin the activity, but they can be, you know, kind of on site and getting themselves ready and staging or something, I don't know.
I think Bill's phrased it, from memory, like the stuff, one we did for Keene was like no noise generating activities or something like that, wasn't that?
Yeah,
Would be allowed on a Sunday?
Right, on a Sunday, but you're talking about in the morning.
I'm talking about within
Any
the
morning.
hours. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
if you say you can
Somebody
start
shows up
working at 7, that means they're gonna show up at 6:30 and they're gonna be standing there drinking coffee and talking probably and kinda getting stuff together in their truck and, you know, which I'm not saying is wrong. I'm just saying, is this clear enough what we mean?
So should we change that sentence, instead of construction shall not commence, construction and noise generating activities shall not commence? Is that your concern?
Activity, any activity, you can construct activity, probably.
I mean, that's what it says already, I think, but.
I mean, construction is, in my mind, is, you know, you're moving earth, you're using machinery, generating a lot of noise, versus just a crew that comes to the site and is milling around until they can actually commence
I think the only concern
those
is,
activities.
does the milling around, for instance, involve firing up a truck and moving something, getting it ready to use it? But, well, I mean, I'm just saying, you know, if we're a little more tight, like Brent suggested, we could close that.
Construction and noise generating activities shall not begin before 7 a.m.
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
Just because you know, staging could be considered different than construction.
Practical experience, to Greg and, to Greg's point, the bottom line is they show up and they're getting them, you know, they're talking, they're looking at plans and doing this, but normally it's before 7 o'clock, if that's the time frame, they're not starting the trucks and they're not moving things around. And if you phrase it that way, they can't be, which is reasonable.
So we're proposing to add, after construction, noise generating activities.
Yeah. And or
Construction
something
and
like that.
noise generating activities shall not commence.
Yeah.
And then same with the last sentence, no construction or noise generating activity whatsoever shall
Shall
take place on
cease.
Sunday.
Yeah.
And the Sunday one, that's fair, because if they wanna bring in someone to stage or plan or do surveying or do and they're not causing, and there's a pickup truck driving around the site, the residents shouldn't be opposed to that, that's not
Right.
unreasonable.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good.
So we're looking to change the last sentence.
Just add noise generating before activity.
Brent's addition just really is better than we had for the
Look at me.
rather
Whoa,
verbose
you have a
condition I did
definition
on last.
Got it. So activity becomes noise generating activity.
So in that last sentence, no construction or noise generating activity?
Correct.
Shall take place on Sunday.
All right. Feel okay
Federal
about that?
holidays, what about federal holidays?
You know, I'm fine excluding the federal holidays. I think that that's reasonable. If we can, I don't know, is there a better term?
You mean no construction on federal holidays?
Like, you know,
I think
Thanksgiving.
it's fair
You think it's fair to not have it?
to exclude those days.
From construction, no construction on those days.
Or noise generating.
Or noise
activity.
generating activities.
If that's what the board wants, that
I'm
language.
saying it. I don't know if I'm throwing it out there.
I would be in favor of that.
I mean,
Yeah,
to
I
be
know where
clear,
you're
we're
at.
talking
Yeah,
about the
that's
4th of
right.
July,
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, Christmas,
Like
New
7
Year's
days.
Day.
Yeah.
You know, it's not,
A relatively small number.
you know, there's, what are there, 10 or 12 or something? Labor Day,
Sure.
I'm good with that. Is that,
Boxing Day.
is that a clear enough definition? I mean, there are,
Right.
I'm fine with that, because I'm sure a list of it exists, so if that's what the board wants.
Or federal holidays.
So I think it's an additional,
But you
or
can
Sunday
just-
or federal
Right,
holidays, so,
exactly.
yep.
good with that? I'll set
Yes,
with that one.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Take silence as a yes.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's a nod.
So I'm on the next page.
So I remember there was a lot of discussion around number 39.
Yeah, I had that
Where
too.
we were gonna, defer to Rick on that one, I believe.
The temporary certificates of occupancy
Yeah.
discussion.
And I know the applicant had concerns about this. I
What
don't
came of it?
I don't see why, myself, I don't see why we would exclude temporary certificates of occupancy. It's a difficult thing to manage, and from what I've seen, without that as a tool to meet other deadlines and so forth. And you know, we've probably all occupied buildings under temp C of O without even knowing it, and not had any issues. You know, I mean, if Rick is issued a TCO for something, he's clear on why he's granting it and what it means. So I don't have a problem with excluding that particular line. I'll
Should we-
read
should we
the
maybe
rest of it.
Striking,
Do we strike it or say temporary certificates of occupancy will be, granted at the discretion of the building?
That's how it is.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Cause he, or,
There's no need to restate
that
the
already
law.
happened.
Yeah.
Well, what does the rest of it say here?
This is 39, right?
39,
so
yeah.
I'm just gonna change
Just make
it,
the statement.
temporary certificates of occupancy may
It
be
doesn't-
granted at the discretion of the building inspector.
Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
It almost seems like this might be
What was
two
in that
two
discussion?
separate conditions in a way.
Subject to,
Yeah.
Just some edits there that didn't get incorporated, I'm not sure
Okay.
why. That's what we were talking
Okay.
about, building inspector.
so you're fine with that, with Rick, with the building inspector having discretion, okay?
I'm sorry, can I step back for 1 second?
Mhm.
Number 37,
Yep.
when you and Bill do the final review, the third bullet in my additional VHB comments
Yep,
echoes that. If you could just compare that to 37, and then you can eliminate that third bullet,
okay, so,
just to make sure. The language is somewhat close, but just if you can just read the two of them and just make sure that they're consistent.
okay, so see Wayne's comment?
Yeah, third bullet.
Yep,
Thank you.
yep. Yep.
Uh, I'm just hung up a bit on 40. It's basically, the applicant can demo something if they get a demo permit,
Isn't that always true?
isn't it?
Isn't there only one structure on the site that's not intended to be?
I mean, maybe this isn't an issue. I got hung up. We're now under conditions relating to construction and compliance with site plan and special permit. Really unrelated to the sort of sequence that's implied in F and G, I guess, so. all right,
I think that's reasonable. I mean, I think if they do need a demolition permit.
certainly. But they sequentially, they could do that.
You're just questioning where it's located in the document?
Well, I mean, I guess I got hung up because, conditions precedent to commencement of project. So all of these would be satisfied prior to any demo permits. Then there's conditions precedent to making an application for building permit. So it's, all right, I'm fine with it. I just saw a demo permit and got
Right.
kind of, was thinking about the sort of sequence of things, but it doesn't matter, I don't
So
think.
is your question when it says condition precedent requirements, whether that refers to site disturbance or sort of where in the process that happens? I mean, do you want it to be
Provided
clarified?
that compliance with the condition precedent requirements.
Okay.
So it's basically saying, if you wanna demo something, you have to have a demo permit, and you have to be in compliance with the condition precedent requirements.
Right.
Which, can you explain that maybe briefly?
Well, the condition precedent requirements, one second. So I see that as meaning section F, conditions precedent to commencement of project.
Good, okay, so that makes sense then.
Yes.
The 41, the applicant is responsible for perpetual maintenance of all landscaping, fencing, and related matters on the site. All of our buffers are on the site.
Yes, except for some, there was a separate exhibit that was proposed, I believe, for one of the abutters to put landscaping on their property. But that's not.
Not part of this.
It's not part of this.
Snow storage shall not encroach in the buffers.
43 is 6 feet wide.
There's some edits that need to happen.
Got it.
And it's paved, right?
Yes, asphalt, 6 foot wide asphalt.
You're right.
You're the same ones.
That's
good.
all flat, right? It's all level.
Wasn't it 6 feet?
6 feet, yes.
The passage between the
Yeah,
two
we've already
properties
done
is
that.
dead
Fairly,
level almost, right?
fairly, it shouldn't be an issue. So the edit was, it should be, instead of gravel stone, it should be asphalt, and I had written down, just how it didn't get carried through.
That's okay.
Parentheses, minimum
That's fair.
4-inch thick, and 6 feet wide. That's correct.
Minimum 4-inch asphalt?
Yeah.
So 44, we did touch on this briefly last night. My concern is that we just ensure that the public sidewalks or
Granite curb.
curbing on public property is granted. If that's the case in the plans, fine, but I don't have a problem saying it explicitly.
I believe it was called out in the plans, in the roadway improvement plans. Specifically.
Why not just, to be sure, just put it right there?
Bill, you don't have the offset plans, right?
Yeah, I did.
I do not.
Can I look at them?
Those are my tabs.
Yeah, wait. Which one? This one that I just took off?
Ah. I'm pretty sure it calls out concrete. If you look at this, the T intersection one, you. Yeah.
Yeah, this granite curb. It's kind of like a strange question.
The offsite.
Every place there's a sidewalk on Parker Street, there's granite curb. There's other locations that there's some there's some asphalt berm rather, and there's some areas that are just edge of road. And it appears appropriate how they have it laid out,
Edge of road just into
just like country drainage, just like.
country drainage. no, with the sidewalk that, or
With
no,
no
or no
sidewalk.
sidewalk at all, yeah.
Correct. I think it's, how it's indicated up here is appropriate.
Are the sidewalks concrete?
It's called on their sidewalk, called that concrete.
Hold on. I don't think they are, hold on. Now look, look at that section. Could have sworn, just bear with me. It's not shown here. Yep, all the sidewalks are concrete, sorry.
Thank
Those
you.
are-
Just a general question about these construction conditions. What's the relationship to the off-site improvements? Is there a relationship at all, or are all those construction activities the town's responsibility to handle?
Which one are you
Town
referring to, or are you
standard.
just asking a general question?
Like
Sort of
construction hours
general
and that sort of thing?
hours, I guess, dust control, all that, is that all just, it's a town project, so it's,
Well, they're not, I
Town
mean, the
standards.
developer will be constructing this stuff.
okay, right.
I don't personally think that those improvements should probably be held to the same level as the site work.
Sure, I
Because
just
they're
wanna
within-
understand that.
Yeah, they're within public way, I mean, I don't know if it needs to be specified, I mean, then we're not gonna let them start, you know, at the crack of dawn, it's gonna be normal operating hours.
Police detail
There's
and
gonna
all
have
that
to be
stuff.
police
It's pretty
details, and all that
standard
stuff that we
yeah.
worked out.
Okay,
I'm not sure it has to be actually specified
okay.
in this decision.
Right, business as usual.
Right, like we would any other contractor working the roadway.
Dust control, we're giving them the ability to control it with whatever means. I guess there's a related point having to do, we were gonna try to capture something about, some of the bare pads, if they're pads that are left bare for 6 months, 3 months, I don't know, some period of time, that they'd be just loamed and seeded for temporary, dust control condition. Has that made it in, or? I know that's, just to make sure it's clarified.
So, it's actually a really good point, Greg. I don't remember reading that. One of the other, boards I've dealt with in the past actually has a really good condition that, I could probably find the language somewhere. But, basically it says that, it's actually, I'm sorry, it's not a condition, it's in their zoning. And it says, any, I'm stretching, bear with me. Any exposed, surfaces have to be stabilized with hay mulch or loam and seed, if left for more than, I think it may be 14 days,
Mhm.
which seems reasonable, so that you don't have excessive erosion, that's what they're trying to stop.
I thought we had that.
I didn't read it here, Bill, but maybe I missed it.
Yeah, we talked about it, but I don't remember seeing it in the draft.
All right, so it would be an additional condition or part of, or in addition to 46, any exposed or unstabilized,
Yeah,
unexposed?
any,
Bare, or, yeah, it could be its own thing.
An separate
Conditions.
condition?
Yeah, like, we talked about whether it's building pads or.
well, it's not really, you're not really worrying about building pads,
Right,
you're
no, we
worried
said
about
s-
erosion.
Yeah.
Excavated areas that have not been stabilized.
Which is like a
Not
pile
Any,
of
any,
dirt.
Phrasing this
any,
correctly.
any, yeah, it's any
Broken ground.
area. They're gonna be building all the infrastructure and parking and all that stuff first. And there'll be some time between when different buildings are developed and so forth, and those empty spots should be stabilized in the interim, with.
Yep.
That's
So what do we call those empty spots?
How about just, we go with your comment, Barbara, just any non-stabilized construction materials or areas on site
Or bare soil.
or bare soil shall be stabilized, with hay mulch or seed if left for more than 14 days.
Okay. Let's see, 40, I'm just reading 47. On a public or private off-site roadway overnight. I get the no idling. I guess I'm hung up here on, I'm on 47.
Yep.
No parking of construction vehicles, I get it on public, but no
That's all it
parking
should say.
on private off-site roadway overnight. I
Yeah.
mean, they should be able to leave
On
their equipment there
Public
overnight.
roadways.
And what's a private offsite
that's the
roadway,
catch.
right? Like,
We have no
Someone
right to
else's.
dictate to them
Yeah, I
that
think
they
that's-
can't park equipment on their
Yeah.
land.
That's probably just,
Right.
we've included a condition like that where it was
Yeah.
relevant, where somebody's constructing, working in an area where there are private ways, so.
Oh, I see, okay.
So where a private way functions essentially as a public way, but is not in fact a public way, that's what that's directed
Gotcha.
at, so it was just the,
Like a subdivision.
And it says off-site, I mean, that's what it meant, right? I mean, private off-site, but.
so,
right, so if there's a private street across the street
Right.
down somewhere, they can't just park everything there because it's not public.
Right.
Got it, so
That
that should
makes
stay
sense.
in.
Yeah.
so I don't, I mean, I just don't know whether there are private ways in that area, so.
Private
We should
offsite,
keep
okay,
it
so the
anyway.
private
Don't we
offsite
have like a
stays.
bizarre amount of private ways,
Kinda do.
non-incorporated roads in this town?
Bizarre.
Bizarre is a good
Unusually
word.
high.
Off-site, I mean, as long as it says off-site, then that captures it.
Right.
Overnight, certainly not overnight, or for longer than 1 hour. Okay, I guess there's times when they might need to park for up to 1 hour on the public street. Is that
Right,
reasonable?
waiting for, to get into the site or
It's a
something.
50-acre site, there's gotta be room for some cars
Yeah,
somewhere.
I mean,
So, anyways,
This is, yeah,
it
this
seems
is,
reasonable.
this is, I think it's okay to
Boilerplate.
include this, but it's really not conducive to this project, because they're not gonna have people offsite, there's no reason to.
Right,
Idling of, because for no long, 5 minutes, isn't that state law?
it is for
Um,
buses, I know that.
I think it is, well.
Cleaner Act.
So no idling of construction-related vehicles shall occur for a period of longer than 5 minutes. That's a little unreasonable, isn't it?
Wintertime.
Where did that even come from? Because if they're working, the 10-wheeler pulls in, it's running constantly. You can't shut off. I'm not in favor of the wording. I don't think that's reasonable for anybody.
What if we were to say within 100 feet from the property line, or something like that, to that effect? I mean,
Can't we just default to the construction hours? You guys can talk about it, but I think that's really, that's unfair to ask anybody to not leave a piece of construction equipment idling for more than 5 minutes.
I think I'm comfortable with Wayne's thought on construction hours, noise generation.
You follow my thought, right? So you've got loaders driving all over the place, right? And the guy stops to do something, and the truck pulls up. Normally, the 10-wheelers, they never even shut off, because they're moving, they may sit there for 15 minutes and then move to some other place on the site and dump or move, or, diesels, they're not easy to start that equipment, and that's why they don't shut them off. I don't know, is this a standard condition that we've had? It seems odd.
We've included it,
Any
it's there
thoughts?
because in drafting, we've included it before, I think,
30 minutes?
5 minutes may be unreasonable, I leave that to the board and to the town engineer.
I'm just thinking of the
town
guys that are
planner.
out there in January working, and they're
No, I
gonna
understand. I
take
mean,
lunch in
it's-
their car,
Fine, that's fine.
Well, we'll keep the wind off.
I mean, the intent, I guess, is to, well, two pieces of intent: air quality and noise pollution,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I wonder if there's
30
a
minutes?
way where if you're gonna idle, go over there, maybe instead of right next to the abutter's house. There's time, there's location. I don't know, what do people think?
Except like working on the, the borders.
Right, but
They're
working
gonna
is
be
excluded, this is
not
just
idling.
idling.
Well, if they're working on it and then they're idling there as part of
Yeah,
their
it's
work.
hard-
You know what
it
I'm saying?
becomes
Just when they're
difficult.
doing that part first, I wouldn't wanna pigeonhole them for that, but I mean, for the rest of the project, I get it.
30 minutes?
I like Andrew's suggestion.
30 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, that seems reasonable. I mean, if the guy literally walks away from his truck and he goes to have lunch for an hour and he leaves it idling, that's kind of irresponsible. But if he's just moving around and just happens to be sitting there, that's not.
I can do 30.
30 minutes? 30 minutes.
No,
I'm saying if it doesn't leave the 5 in there, your phone just won't stop ringing with complaints.
Let's just leave the 5 in just for Wayne.
Put the 5 in with Wayne's direct line.
Right, please call this number to discuss the 5 minutes.
I'll have Rick on speed dial. Compliance issue, compliance issue.
But Mr. Chairman, the town planners brought up the sort of the origin of this, which is, I believe, that motor vehicles are prohibited. That 5 minutes is what motor vehicles are prohibited from idling for more than 5 minutes. So construction vehicle probably is not the same as a
By
motor
law,
vehicle.
by law, you're saying.
Right, but that's where the 5 minutes comes from. So it's, it may be unreasonable in the construction context, and, that's certainly up to the board, but that's where that came from.
Well, they have to comply with all laws anyway.
Right,
So
so
if
for
it's
motor
construction and
vehicles,
this doesn't, yeah.
So, a delivery truck is a motor vehicle.
Correct, so
right?
it can't
So-
idle.
Those are all exemptions called
So-
on the law, all that kind of stuff is called
So,
on the law.
this
So-
goes to construction, and that, I would say that's, construction vehicles aren't, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, construction vehicles, not trucks, but the construction equipment is not a motor vehicle.
So when you, I guess, just to beat this to death a little bit more, would you consider somebody's pickup truck that they're or car that they're commuting to the site to work in, would you call that a construction-related vehicle?
Well, you could call it a construction-related vehicle, but it would still be a motor vehicle and subject to the law. It would be both a motor vehicle and a construction-related vehicle.
So you're saying, if I drive my car to the site,
Yep,
it's on the site, I'm even doing construction-related things with it, it's still a motor vehicle,
Still a
and it's
motor
5
vehicle.
minutes. So really, this technically just applies to, like, non-street legal or,
Tractors.
Equipment.
right.
Equipment.
So, if the board wants to remove this provision, as pertaining to construction-related vehicles, meaning the construction equipment itself, the construction vehicles, it can do that, but as a matter of law, any motor vehicle is subject to the 5-minute idling law.
So if that.
So you don't have to include it.
We don't
Sounds
need
to me
include
You
it.
don't need to
End
include
result
it
is let's
because
just go with
it's
the
the
30
law
and move on.
already,
Right.
whether it's
Yeah,
enforced is
So
another
let's,
question.
can we just agree with that?
I think what it sounds like to me is there is no state law that governs construction-related vehicles, so we wanna put in a 30-minute provision.
Whatever's
I
the
think.
board's pleasure.
Let's do it.
If, without this, construction vehicles could idle forever, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. 49,
So is that 30? Is that what the board decided?
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry, 48. This is the building inspection process, this would be 48. This would be Rick determining that the building elevations and materials are substantially consistent.
I think so, yes.
Okay. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, okay.
They've submitted all those, so he's got those to check against.
Is there a similar process of approving the construction documents or permit drawings for the stormwater system does Rick check those for compliance with the order of conditions, or you?
The applicants agreed to provide their own engineer for inspections of that, and then ultimately an as-built plan would have to be prepared, which is covered in 49, that depicts that was constructed as in compliance with the design plan, approved plan rather. And as we agreed in 56, which we haven't got to yet, the town will be providing partial inspections. Compliance.
So 51, I know we touched on this last night. I thought that the wording was a little strange, but I understand most of it is about the pharmacy drive-through. But the first bit here, the planning board reserves the right to review compliance with the terms and conditions of this decision at any time. That means that at any time, if any of us feel, or we collectively decide, we can take up a review of compliance,
Yes.
which could be us asking Wayne, Bill, or Rick to
Inspect.
give us a report
Report.
on compliance or something.
Correct.
And then I guess we deal with whatever is found. We don't know
Right.
how much control we'll have at that time, but
Well, if if there's a lack of compliance, say certain activities are conducted prior to completion of everything that's supposed to be done under conditions precedent, the building inspector has the authority to cease and desist until whatever needs to be cured is cured. So that would be the enforcement, would be a cease and desist from the building inspector, not really an order from planning board. That's how I see it, but if the board, is that reassuring to the board?
yeah, I guess it is. I mean, this condition is like a very broad statement, and then it kind of parlays into a specific conversation about I mean, is that just kind of like an IE, the drive-through is one.
Would it be better if it were separated into two conditions? The first one, the planning board reserves the right to review compliance with the terms and conditions of this decision at any time, subject to enforcement of this decision by the building inspector, and then new condition with respect to the pharmacy drive-through, make that a separate condition?
I think so. I think it gets the second part gets a little lost. I mean, that's a specific instruction. It's to say,
Yeah.
this now becomes Wayne's duty once a year to provide this report, basically, or an opinion.
So.
It actually only references doing it once.
Just once, within the first year.
So, I mean, all Bill has to do is put a note in his calendar to remind you guys, right?
Didn't we talk about changing that
A
from?
year after the opening of the
Right.
supermarket.
I have
Right.
CO, I have that we changed effective date of this decision to CO.
For the pharmacy, right?
Right, for that part, yeah.
What did you just say?
Right.
But we're changing,
think
we're
so.
splitting this into two conditions. The first one, planning board reserves the right to review compliance with the terms and conditions of this decision at any time and
It's like almost
Direct-
like the last,
to
very
be
last
enforced,
condition.
yeah, we could, to be enforced, by the building inspector, and then new condition, the town engineer shall provide, the planning board within 1 year from the certificate of occupancy with this decision with an opinion as to.
Certificate of occupancy of the pharmacy. if I'm
Of the
correct.
Right,
pharmacy.
correct.
Mhm.
That's right.
Okay,
The rest of it's reasonable.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, Exhibit E, we talked about that, we talked about signage yesterday. Rear building signage.
Oh, there's the.
What is exhibit D?
Exhibit D.
53, if you look at 53, also it's supposed to be exhibit E,
Okay.
but, it looks like.
I believe so.
Exhibit E.
What is exhibit
Exhibit
D?
D is,
Concept plan and signage plan approved by
Oh.
town meeting.
no, that's right, the concept plan signage plan, yeah.
So,
Okay, so it is D.
It is D.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that
But the
attached to this.
second part of condition 53, we were asking about yesterday about the building signage on the rear. That was where, and it was, it's in that condition.
Wait, just so I understand, what's the relationship of the rear building signage? Is that subject to the size limitations of?
No.
No, it's not.
I don't believe so, right?
We-
But they're all,
Did agree to do that.
they should all be a standard size, right? It's
But do
just
we know what that
I-
size is?
Let's see.
For the, in the back?
It's just a.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a problem, I just wanna know if you want it more
I think it was-
specific.
I think it was called out on the plan.
So
It's
that's,
all just a uniform for
I thought it was just a comment
security
that
or
we-
for identification, I guess.
It
right?
came up when with the conversation with the applicant, I think, it was in relation to one of the butters talking about the signage, and they said, we're not gonna put anything back there, we'd be limited just to a,
Black and white
name
ID
tag,
sign,
yeah,
name
a little
tag, right.
door sign.
Yeah. I remember
That's,
seeing it called out.
that's what it should be.
Yeah.
but again, I mean, I don't have a sense whether, I don't know whether that,
Here we go.
there's a limit somewhere, whether there's a size limit on that sign to be, that's referenced elsewhere. Plus, I don't, for some reason, I don't have D attached to this, can you remind me
No.
what D is?
D is the,
Retail ID.
the, concept plan is the
it's not.
signage
Oh,
plan, the whole shebang,
Yeah, so those aren't.
that's the whole.
okay, so is it indicated, just, I won't shuffle around for it, but is the, whatever size, is it indicated enough?
Brent's,
Does it have it written?
looking
Look like
for
it?
it right now.
The circles are smaller.
It's not indicated on the rear.
It's not in
No,
E.
I don't believe it.
Yeah. The sizes are not indicated.
Yeah, no, it's not.
I mean, maybe the board doesn't want one, but I just, there's a lot of discussion of the size of signage elsewhere on it, and the rear of the buildings is visible, from
The-
different
my-
abutting properties, so.
My memory and my intent is that it's a modest sized identification
it's-
sign.
it's just
you
a-
know,
Yeah.
That's it.
Unlit, on anything, just,
This
Making
is
sure
the
you're
door,
getting right
this is the
door.
door you're
Yeah.
about to
Right.
open.
Yes.
Rick, with the reason that we did like, E, attachment E and everything, is that Rick is going to be using this as the guide for his permitting of the projects, and if it's not listed on there, it's not gonna be permitted. And this, so by putting it in the decision, that it gives him, an authorization to allow that. And I mean, it wouldn't hurt to put a maximum size, but I don't know.
So
it's not
so you're
called out.
saying that you think it needs to be in Exhibit E, just a
No.
descriptor?
No, I mean,
It just, we're leaving that unspecified in a way that we're not, we're providing a lot of detail on the size of all the other signs. And if it just says rear building signage, there's no guidance on the size. I'm not saying the applicant or the tenants will want a large sign, but there's no guidance whatsoever. So I guess I'm just asking the board if it thinks such.
I think we need guidance. Could be very simple, but it should be somewhere, right?
Okay, I would also just say unlit as well.
Mhm.
yeah.
That would be,
That's good, yeah. Then
but
why would,
whatever language the board, whatever limit the board wants to place, so maybe it can tie it to one of the other descriptors in Exhibit E.
would it
Just
make
think
more
how big
sense
does it
to
have to
put
be to
the
see?
second one, do you think?
Well,
Yeah,
Two
I don't,
square
I
feet.
don't really know where to start,
Yeah, well,
like how big it
I don't wanna
should
take
be.
it out.
so,
Like on a
sorry.
door.
so
Quick,
they're
this-
noted here,
Just one more comment.
but they don't, so I remember actually we had this exact conversation with Boyd, right? Because these little, which is what we're talking about,
Yep.
are not noted in the key. And I remember having that discussion with him, and And that's what we're all referencing.
Just to be clear, the retail and residential graphics, branding and wayfinding, that is Exhibit D, is that correct?
Yeah.
And then in addition, well,
Concept and signage plan approved by.
Concept and signage plan.
these are one and the same.
I believe so.
Yes.
Okay,
So there's-
so now
is
we
there
also have
any-
Exhibit E,
Right.
two documents that contain signage
Yes,
information.
Exhibit E is the Mark Rosenshine and the applicant worked that out to address
And
the,
we have condition 53, which has also a description of these rear building signage, limited to
Well-
tenant names and suite numbers on rear doors.
it says on rear doors. So, I mean, really, you could just say, you know, right, how big of a door are you gonna have?
That's a good point.
So,
Well, I just, I
There's a
think this
limitation.
could be.
The whole door.
No, I think this could be interpreted as tenant names in a big sign, whatever size they want, and suite number on the rear door. It's just, it's
Okay,
ambiguous.
so that's not
I'm-
good.
So I'm, it's whatever the board, if the board doesn't want any limits on the size of the signs on the rear of the building, then it can leave it as is. I'm just saying, there is room here.
We want limits.
Okay, so,
I speak for everybody,
okay,
I think.
so,
No greater than 1/4 the size of the door, I don't know, something like that.
but the wall, the way it's written now, the suite numbers on rear doors, that still leaves the building sign and the tenant name completely open.
So, okay, so we need to,
Well, can't we just rearrange the sentence?
Yes, that's what, yes.
Yeah.
well,
yes,
here, but
please.
here's a question.
So let's rearrange
I
the
don't know if
sentence.
this matters. Do we leave 53, or do we strike it and put this in Exhibit E? Or does it matter? It might not matter.
It's, Bill, as a matter of fact, Bill just suggested something like that, and if that's, it really is whatever, however the board wants to address this, but I just think, it's somewhere it has to say that rear building signage is unlit. You know, and then
To
the
me,
board,
Could-
my instinct would be to strike it and add a section in Exhibit E that deals with the rear signage, because that's where Rick is gonna be considering, you know, the whole,
All in one place.
the whole thing.
Okay.
And we need to basically say that rear signage is not included in the tier
Okay.
framework. It's every business
It's not
is
lit.
permitted to have one, and then what is it? Whatever, limit the size, unlit, and all that, and then that should be it.
what's the size?
Well, let's hold on. Sizes, signage types and size.
None of that deals with it.
Right, but I'm just saying, is that the appropriate section, maybe, to add?
Yeah,
A
a
number
D.
3, or an E,
Right,
under
right.
tier 3.
And after tier 3, you know,
D
rear
tier
door
3.
identifying signs.
Right, rear door identifying signs are permitted for all businesses. Sign design is limited to, tenant name,
Suite number.
suite number, and shall be of a certain size. That's what we need to decide, you know?
2 square feet
So the sign's on the door or the sign's on the building?
on the door.
Okay.
Sign is affixed to the door and is, you know, what do you say?
2 square feet.
Do we care- I
It's
mean,
30
do we
inches
really care
wide.
It's
about
on
the
the
size of
door,
what's gonna be
yeah,
on
if
the
it's
door?
on the door, I
Text.
don't.
Well, it could be the whole
specify
door.
so-
Text only.
So what?
Yeah, that's fine. What I wanted to avoid was no,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
definition, a condition that allowed
It's a
for a
bad
size
definition.
of unlimited to size
Right.
on the
Yeah.
wall, on the
Yeah.
building. If it's
Right.
on the door.
It can only be.
put limited on the rear door.
That's fine, yes.
Alright.
Yep,
I thought that was how we always had it planned, on the rear door with the.
It just not
It just,
specified.
it doesn't exist anywhere, that's what we're.
We did have the
thinking is
discussion,
the issue.
just never made it.
Is that,
that's fine.
you got that one?
Right, we're striking it, we're adding language.
Yeah, I know, they're gonna have really big doors.
Exhibit
No.
A.
You know that.
They could.
Like,
Okay, on 54, I thought maybe, this has to do with the lighting and the police review of the lighting. It says 6 months after the first issuance of any C of O. Should it say each C of O? Or, I mean, it's a little arbitrary. I mean,
The first.
there could be multiple C of Os. Which one? I don't know. It's
6 months after the issuance of a certificate,
a C of O.
certificate of occupancy.
Can I ask you a
Any
question?
suggest,
Why
pick one,
why do we
any
wanna
one, you know?
To defer to the CO. Why don't we defer to completion of the site lighting? Right, because they could, technically, they could issue, let's say the grocery store opens first, right? And maybe they only put 3 lights in for that. Police chief's not gonna be able to evaluate that to see if it's safe or not for the site.
Well, I think we want it to be safe if people are gonna be occupying the buildings.
It's a good point,
We
right?
wanna make sure it's
That's
safe for
fine.
the people that come.
They would need minimum lighting in order for the CO.
That's all right, that's a good point.
Or should it say the first certificate of occupancy? You know, the first C of O is the first time we have the public on the site.
Is that what it says on 54?
Well, and it says any certificate of occupancy.
Then what if subsequently, another phase of the project is constructed? Would
So-
you not want it to be triggered then as well?
Sorry, let me just start over. 6 months after the first issuance of any certificate of occupancy. So maybe that is saying what I
For
wanted
each
to say.
building?
No. I think it might be saying what I think you
The
wanted to
first.
say. 6 months after the first C of O is issued.
After the first time anyone can occupy a building,
Yes.
6 months later, the chief of police will come evaluate it to make sure it's.
That's the intention.
But what
right?
about
Why
Wayne's
6 months
point
later?
to if they build the supermarket first and only put up a few of the lights, then the police chief's not really gonna be
It's
able
too
to.
early, you're
Right,
saying.
exactly.
So how about
And
subsequent,
then-
how subsequent inspections shall be determined by the police chief after first CO to ensure safety or public safety?
Because I mean, if we issue a CO and the public's on the site, you're only gonna see if it's safe 6 months later.
Yeah.
That doesn't
I
make
mean,
sense
maybe it's
per
his,
se.
maybe it's his discretion.
Well, I think the
So-
intent of the police chief to go was to determine whether, the intensity of the light, whether he thought that they were going to, require
Right, but-
additional lighting.
I get it totally, but why 6 months after occupancy?
Why not immediately?
Yeah.
Oh, because,
Yeah, that's a good
no,
point.
because, no, it was because it had to do with the light dimming, remember? And we were talking about
They were gonna
how
adjust
bright
it
it was gonna
themselves.
be, and this was primarily to do with the individually controlled lighting and where is it going to have to be dimmed or adjusted.
Well, you might wanna have another visit, but if we're actually going for a safety inspection, it should be when the public's allowed. Right? I mean, am I
So-
crazy?
Do you want to just say upon issuance of the certificate of occupancy?
I think the intent was to really, to, I guess, both Megan and Andrew's point, I don't think it's to determine whether the site lighting is adequate, it was really the security lighting.
Yeah.
That was the only concern.
If there are dark spots
Right,
that
it
we
was
didn't see.
is the security lighting adequate enough to assure safety on the whole site?
But
You're saying should that be earlier?
Should it
That's
be-
correct,
right,
it was,
right away.
but
Should they
it
just
came up.
always have the ability to provide feedback about that at any time?
Right.
They're gonna
At
be on
the-
the site
at
all
the
the
chief's
time,
discretion.
right?
But the reason it was brought, that came up was because some of the abutters were concerned about the lights.
Being too bright?
Right, too bright, and
Right.
and the police chief, and Dan went in and met with the police chief. And the idea was that they would have individually adjusted, they could be individually adjusted, and we wanted to have the police chief have an opportunity to weigh in, that was the way I remember.
If they're gonna be dimmed,
Yeah, if there's
The
any
chief would
issue,
need to make sure-
and give it 6 months to see if there's gonna be a problem or not. That was the way I understood it.
Maybe it's not 6 months
Yeah, it's
then,
just-
maybe it's just like any time the applicant proposes to change the site lighting.
But I still
Yes,
think it makes
right.
sense to have it at issuance of CO.
Right, but I guess I'm reading this differently than what I originally was reading it. This is not about the police giving a review of the site. This is about somebody wanting to change the lighting for a design or light pollution point of view and double checking with the police that it's going to be okay for them to do that. I think that's different, isn't it?
Well, I mean, this actually the chief did, right? I wrote it, gave it to him, said change what you want. What did you want? You know, and it was based on their meeting. But I think that we were trying to do two things. We were trying to ensure there was a level of public safety that would be for the security, but also the concerns were raised by, you know, several of the abutters about, is this gonna be into our bedrooms, you know, and this type of thing.
Right, but the chief isn't gonna,
That doesn't, the
Yeah.
police don't seem like the remediation
Right.
pathway for that.
So can I, sorry,
Oh, no, but I think, as I understood it, and I could be wrong, but, so if there was a problem raised where they said, yes, this light is just completely obtrusive, it could be dimmed, the police chief could evaluate it. I think that's why I remember.
right.
From memory, I think the discussion we had was, some of the residents were concerned with, is the security lighting too bright? And I think somebody suggested, why don't we just talk to the police chief and have him evaluate this 6 months later, and everyone said, okay, that sounds good. And I think it was like literally that simple, but now that we're talking about it, maybe 6 months is too long.
I'm inclined to say it should be sort of ad hoc, as Greg was suggesting.
Why don't we just have it, you know, at CO? Periodic review by the police chief, almost on an as-needed basis.
Or, you know, prior to any change, at CO, I agree, for sort of safety just in general. But then prior to any change.
Yeah, cause you can't be dimming lights without the police knowing that and being comfortable with it, I think.
But the police
For
also aren't
security.
the avid, we need to specify, I mean,
Right.
you check with the police, but that's an offshoot of what's actually happening, right?
so could I bring up something, I think this is the time to refer to a discussion the board was having last night about what to do if there seem to be concerns from the neighborhood about impacts. And my suggestion then was to have some procedure, sort of administrative procedure, or administrative type procedure, for those modifications. And John Whitten and I talked about this a lot, and for a number of reasons, what we're recommending is a condition that leaves that authority with the board. So the proposed condition would be, the board retains authority to require reasonable and minor modifications to lighting on the site and to any activity conducted under section 3 of the O&M plan, which is the hours of operation stuff, to mitigate the impacts of the development on the neighborhood. So that's would be a proposed condition to address the brightness and the other aspects of the project involved in the O&M. Then,
We can do that.
can you? Yes.
I think you
I
like
still
Barbara
wanna
John's
comply with
condition.
the security
What?
concerns, though, of the
Sorry?
police chief. I think at the same time
Right.
that you still wanna comply with
Yeah, oh, yeah, so
security
that would be a
concerns.
separate.
Can't go below what, you
Right,
know,
so,
what the chief
so I would, that would be what we recommend to address sort of mitigation of impacts that are discovered after the project's constructed. But then I would also want the board to retain a condition that does provide for safety, review by the chief of police for safety of any, I mean, if the concern is too bright, there's that you can't go below whatever level the police chief thinks is acceptable, so.
Certainly.
So I would just propose this condition and, I can draft some other language about, but shall the approval of the police chief, something like that.
And that would apply to any changes to the O&M table 3 that could be construed as a minor modification?
Yeah, I've said minor modification, reasonable and minor, because I don't wanna give the board authority to sort of revisit
Yeah.
a lot.
No, I
But
think
John and I
it's-
do not feel comfortable leaving it as an administrative process, so I'm trying to define it as narrowly as possible, and that's why I said site, lighting on the site and
The table.
section, and the table.
So what happens if, you know, we revisit it
Yep.
and we have some residents that say some of this lighting's unreasonable and they come before us and then we have the applicant come and say, we think it's reasonable, and we have the police saying it could go either way. You know what I mean? I guess it's,
Then
It's
our
up to the
call.
board, that's your
Okay.
call. Just the same way it is, like what you're doing now, you would just be doing the same thing, you're just revisiting the same subject.
and the public comment piece would be, I mean,
Just-
take it and,
Just take it for what it's
Yeah.
worth. You know, you might hear it and decide, that it does merit a reduction in site lighting or a
Okay.
change in hours, or you might decide, you know, you have to take in testimony from the applicant. The applicant says, no, we really need this.
And we could go see for ourselves as well.
Yes, sure. So I'm trying to carve out as sort of narrow an area as possible. I'm calling it reasonable and minor modifications. So, but I'm certainly open to further tailoring of that language if the board,
I'm strongly in favor
I like
of
it.
John's condition.
my
Um,
condition.
Well, you mentioned John, so but I'll give you full credit.
Thank you.
I like it, and if
Let the
we,
record reflect.
Let the record reflect.
if
Thank
that
you.
goes in, then does that, what does that mean for 54?
So, okay, so the condition, I would insert this condition here somewhere, 54, or before 54.
Would you retain 54?
Well, yeah, no, I wanna retain, I wanna retain 54, and then I wanna add this, the condition I just read, and then add some language that, but it, I mean, it sort of goes without saying, but that the site lighting, you know, the site lighting must comply with the police chief's findings or opinion as to adequacy for public safety. I mean,
Okay.
to me, that goes without saying, but we could put that language in.
And didn't we talk about in 54 changing the 6 months to
Yeah, upon issuance.
upon issuance of CBO?
Yeah, upon issuance. So we'll leave 54, we'll modify 54 to say upon issuance of, do we wanna say any, or the first, or what are we saying, any certificate of occupancy? I don't know what the board decided on that.
First.
The first, okay. So then with that modification, leave 54, then add the condition I just read, and then I can add some language to, after that, that says the boards, or no modification to site lighting may be made that is inconsistent with the recommendation of the police regarding public safety, right?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm stuck on the end of it where it says thereafter, the applicant shall report to the planning board attesting to the adequacy of lighting or noting inadequacies or recommendations from the chief of police. Do we need any of that?
It just says they need to provide a report to you of what was discussed and agreed upon. That's how I interpret that. So that you don't have to take,
It's a report from the first part of the
correct,
condition.
yes.
We could probably just say
Yeah.
that more clearly.
So I'm
Fair
just
enough.
capturing.
The applicant shall report to the board on the findings.
Period.
That's probably adequate.
Heretofore.
So,
Whence,
sorry to delay, but I was just capturing what I just said about no modification may be inconsistent, so I missed whatever you did to the language at the end of this. Is this changed, the report to the planning board?
It shall just be the findings, or the findings, the outcome, shall be reported to the board.
Period, and just strike the rest of it?
Yeah.
So tell me what it is. Lighting, so period, and then thereafter? What to the planning board, period?
I just have one more quick question on this. So if the residents have a complaint about the lights and go to the applicant, like their neighbors, basically, and work something out, run it by the chief of police, are they still coming to us?
We
I
have a
just-
report.
We'll get a report, I just don't know if we always, I mean, I think we should be involved if we need to be, but I mean, if, down the line, this is someone new moves in, this is an ongoing thing, I don't know if we're gonna be tied to every lighting thing forever.
I
Maybe we
think
will.
the applicant really,
It could just be a simple answer, oh yeah, no problem, please think this is fine, we'll adjust this, and then, it doesn't need to come to
well,
us.
the way, under the modifications that were just made, I think the applicant or successor would certainly wanna go to the police chief to find out
Sure.
for the reduction, and then I think under the condition as just revised, the applicant would report that to the planning board, and, I don't see why the planning board would have any reason to take it up if it was something acceptable. But if there were
Well, at least we're just notified.
Yeah, that's great.
notified, so that's how I would see that playing out.
Town planner updates.
Yeah, I
See ya.
think that's good.
Okay. 55 seems good. All right, 56 we've touched on. That's just for clarity, appears in these guys.
So, 57, Barbara.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a request.
Yeah, please.
Well, sorry, 56.
It's okay.
56, we covered when we reviewed.
We talked
Yeah.
about it
Yeah,
yesterday, sorry.
it's like 5 times as long as the one in here, so
Yes.
go with the one we recommended and agreed to with the applicant.
Great.
57, I think you could probably add one sentence to 56
To
and
56.
eliminate 57.
Oh.
I mean, we cover all of that stuff in 56,
In the new 56.
in the new 56.
Let me
All
look
it,
at
basically all it says is the applicant shall give adequate notice of what's going on, in essence.
Let me look at the new 56.
It's 2 pages long. Sorry, my reading meeting jumped ahead. I just-
Sorry, no.
I had already read.
Okay, so the 56 is in there.
We got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
got it. Yeah, if Wayne thinks that this is covered by the new 56, I'll certainly defer to him on that. So you're saying just get rid of it altogether? Or-
57, strike 57, Wayne?
That's my recommendation. I mean, it talks limited to construction of all site work, grading, drainage, and stormwater, and we talk about all of that in 56.
And I'll defer to Wayne on that and to Bill.
I think that if you just read this, you can probably parse some of that right into this, into 56 and be done with it. I don't think it needs to be 2 different conditions. There may be portions that I left out in 56, but I just ask that you just read it and add it in.
I'll see what I can salvage from that.
So 57 will be
Added to 56.
added to, sure, that's
That's all.
fine.
Great.
I think it's redundant if you don't do it, that's all.
Okay, so salvage and add to 56.
Yep.
Okay, 58. This is a performance guarantee for off-site mitigation. And was this changed before? It says prior to issuance of an occupancy permit. Isn't the off-site mitigation happening kind of on its own timeline, well in advance? Or,
So-
I don't know, it seems funny to take a performance guarantee tied to an occupancy permit. Shouldn't it be taken at, what are we trying to,
So what you,
Post the
I think what you're trying to
guarantee.
protect here is that, so technically, the off-site improvements are in support of the project. So technically, they should be constructed, or the majority of them should be constructed prior to the site opening. Or it doesn't have adequate capacity to serve the site, the roads don't have adequate capacity to serve the site. So what this is saying is that if there's work that isn't completed on the off-site, they need to post a bond for that remaining work.
Got it, so they don't post it, the beginning of the off-site improvements, they post it to span the gap between
Yeah,
what
it's-
hasn't been done, if they wanna
And
open,
their CO, that's right.
and they say, okay, well, we've got $100,000 worth of work left or whatever, here's the
Most of-
guarantee,
that's
we will
right.
finish, got it.
Okay, for the record, John and I recommended that the bond be posted at the beginning of the off-site mitigation, and not wait until it's determined what's left, but if this is the decision of the board, you know, certainly I'll respect that.
Well, I'm happy to hear your recommendations,
Absolutely.
It's just,
Seems like that would be more the way that a performance guarantee would work, is
yeah, I mean, when you do a
Post this
subdivision,
beginning.
we had a discussion of this, I don't know, a couple meetings ago, that that, you know, with the subdivision, you post the bond at the beginning, you know, you don't have them start it and then get partway through it, and then
ask for the bond.
and then
or
ask for a
whatever.
bond to cover the remaining part. Now, I mean, it's town property, it's, you know,
Right,
so
that's-
I, you know,
I
a
concur
max,
with council on that.
so the
I think that makes
maximum
sense.
protection to the town is, I mean, and this is what you would be requiring, the only thing I can think of as comparable as a subdivision is, you know, performance bond, posted the same way you would before they start tearing up streets in a subdivision.
We want it at the onset.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, if this is inconsistent with what the board's done previously, I,
No, that's pretty, I think that's consistent, I think the wording on this is weird. But don't we normally require a bond before they start on a subdivision? Yeah, they do.
that's,
It's just a part of draft. the
We did on
resolution.
Keen Ave. He posted a bond and then he asked it to be reduced.
Gotta make his adjustments.
When he was halfway done, which is reasonable.
Wasn't it It wasn't right away. It wasn't right away.
It wasn't?
No.
Okay.
Because
Wasn't
we
that
thought it was.
posting of- Wasn't that the posting of the CF, or of the occupancy permit?
I think it was when we were gonna give him the first, yeah, because we had to, remember we did the tripartite, and we had to go through all that.
I don't remember. I'll defer to you on that, but I don't remember the details of that.
Yeah, I'm sure, so we did it, because we had to get it was, we'd never done it.
Yeah, I don't think we want any work to begin without that guarantee in place. Is that consensus here?
Barbara should craft that, appropriate
okay,
language.
applicant shall post performance guarantee for off-site mitigation and work to be completed within or on Park Street or any other public way prior to commencement of such work. I mean, that'd be my first stab at it.
I think commencement of such work, it implies that that's before the off-site mitigation begins, but wouldn't we want it prior to commencement of
Development.
the, right?
Well, I mean, what
Is
I'm
that-
tying it to though, where this happens, I'm not concerned about the bond, the timing of the bond with respect to construction of the project. What I wanna make sure is that before they start work on the off-site construction, that's when they post the bond for that off-site construction. So that's, so I would say for such off-site mitigation, prior to the commencement of, work on off-site, off-site mitigation, that's the improvements of the improvements,
Is it, could it be kind of project by project, or is that too detailed, right? I mean, I totally understand, you know, dig up a whole intersection, we want it to be finished, but,
I'll defer to staff
Just
on
ask
that,
It's all, isn't it all captured in that
It's all kind of-
document, right? There's a document that, for onsite, a document for offsite.
Yes.
Everything in the offsite package
Is all
that's
together.
off the property,
Right.
that's what we want to guarantee before any of those
Correct.
begin
correct.
work.
So I'm just gonna add post-performance guarantee satisfactory. It could be town council, it could be, I don't know, I would be, if it said satisfactory to council, I'd be looking to your staff to say what's, you know, the sufficient amount. So,
Yeah.
for now, I'm just gonna say council, but you can change that.
It's usually Wayne that gives us those dollar
Right,
amounts,
exactly, so what you can, if you want, you can say satisfactory to town engineer, I'm fine, I'm fine with
They
that.
should prepare the bond, the amount, run it by us, we should approve or recommend that it be.
Okay,
Yeah, that's how we do that. That's
To
good.
be completed, prior to commencement of any such off-site work.
And then,
You know, and if you wanna, the way you do with the subdivision, if you wanna release some of it as they complete, the different sections, you can certainly do that, but, I don't know a lot about
it all
the specifics.
relates to the details
So-
of how it's proceeding, I
So,
think.
alright, so the applicant shall post a performance guarantee satisfactory to the town engineer, for off-site mitigation and work to be completed within or on Parker Street or any other public way prior to commencement of any such off-site work. Is that sufficient?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay.
There was some discussion around.
Yeah, I
think it was
typical.
suggested we wanted to clarify either the number of structures to trigger this or the square feet.
By the way it's written, I guess 50% of the structures, that would mean if there are 10 structures, then six, I suppose, or five. This is typical this is for what? For us to have assurance that they move forward with the project, that
So it doesn't get dragged out. I mean, it's,
What are the-
I've
What's
seen,
the-
what are the
the-
consequences?
Right, exactly.
well, I guess it wouldn't be shut down the project, because that would just be. Right, I don't know, I've seen
How
this.
dare you not build? You can't
You
build.
can't build,
Would it be?
it memorializes an expectation, I'm not sure I know what the, how it would be enforceable. I've seen these in decisions, I've seen decisions without these,
I mean, if it's a condition of the decision
yep.
and it's not met, then don't they lose the right to the decision?
Well, they'd be in violation of the decision, I mean, they,
Say they hadn't built the apartment complex, then would they lose the right to build the apartment complex?
I'm not sure I'd wanna go there because that conflicts
No, I'm
with-
just asking a
yeah,
question.
because that
I'm not
con- No, I know,
proposing
because that
anything.
really conflicts with the MOU and the town meeting approval, so I understand what you're saying, I'm trying to think if there's any sort of any way.
I mean, if it's just saying you must do this
Yes,
or nothing,
I'm gonna post something to council,
yes,
for consideration by the board. I think the intent of this was to make sure that the project proceeded,
Yeah.
and it wasn't delayed for 10 years or something like that, right? Would it be reasonable, and this is where I'm deferring to council, would it be reasonable to say that if no less than 50% of the structures are built within 5 years, the applicant shall return to the planning board to revisit the decision?
I think we did that with the,
That may give you, I mean, if that, we're talking 5 years from now, what happens, I hope I'm completely wrong, but what happens if they're able to build like just the grocery store and nothing else? That may change everybody's opinion of what we really approved, what you guys really approved. And you may wanna revisit it. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah,
good
no,
suggestion.
I wouldn't, so we would leave 59 intact. So you're suggesting add language that says,
They shall return to the board to discuss. I don't
it's just,
know,
I'm not
status and-
crazy about adding language that says if they don't comply, they have to come back to the board, because they really should comply, so I'm thinking about it. Does the board want to move on while I think about it, or, I mean, to me, the best thing is just to leave it as is, and I'm not really sure how you enforce it.
Well, let me ask you this, Barbara. If, the site plan has to be commenced within 2 years under our zoning bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay? And there,
Say that again? Sorry.
we have like.
Well, it's true, it could expire.
Yeah, I mean, if you have, right now, the way it reads for our current zoning bylaws, the site plan approval shall lapse after 2 years from the grant if substantial use thereof has not commenced sooner except for good cause. Such approval may, for good cause, may be extended in writing by a board upon written request of the applicant. So, I mean, to me, that means that there's flexibility for the board to determine if there was only, if nothing significant was built, or nothing that they felt was the spirit of the site plan, couldn't they just do that, and we have that there already?
Yes, I'm just,
But this condition doesn't say anything about good cause, does it?
No, and that was one of the suggestions that that we had discussed.
And then there's gotta be a whole giant rabbit's hole of what constitutes good cause.
And Barbara, I
Yeah.
think that we had discussed this actually.
Can
at
you
one
remind me?
meeting, yeah, where, obviously the whole idea is to get these pads built and
Yeah.
get these tenants in as soon as possible. But if all of a sudden we have another 2008,
Right.
That's good cause.
Right, so
That's a reason
so
why
we did-
we're
so
not
I
gonna
did
fill it.
suggest good language, like good cause, or you did, or somebody did,
Yeah, well, I think actually Bill had mentioned it.
or Bill, okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Something that's out of the, Fourth of
okay,
July.
yeah, that makes sense to me.
Very quick.
So,
Kim Jong-un.
so we could just add the phrase, except for good cause as found by the board, the applicant shall complete.
Although, I mean, does having something that we don't know how it would be pursued or enforced just create a situation where people who were looking for something to complain about could find that language and say, raise a stink around it?
Ask the board to enforce it, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, with no clear definition of what's the enforcement, we don't know. There's no or else, right? It's,
That's a good point, but I think this is the best we can do.
well, I hear you, I'm just saying, like, is it better just to not include? Because are we
No.
creating something that creates a fulcrum for someone to, try to make a stink about something with
Well-
not having any real path to resolving?
Well, the path would be, I mean, if it's not completed by then we get a report, from town engineer, and they have to come in and show good cause why it hasn't been completed.
Sorry, can you rehash how this condition relates to the site plan bylaw?
Bill, do you wanna rehash that?
Is this like an extension of that to 5
If-
versus 2 years, or is it this?
I think
This
it's
is
different.
really
It's different.
it's almost, the site plan says, or the condition in the zoning bylaws, it says that it's 2 years for a significant, for something to get going, basically, commencing the site plan.
Significant commencement?
Well, the way they, no, it wasn't that, it was phrased as,
Hang on.
Substantial progress, I think.
it was, yeah,
I can-
substantial, if a substantial use thereof has not sooner commenced, except for good cause. Mind you, I didn't write that. But, I think that the essence of that is like, so you just don't have these hanging out there forever. So I would, first of all, would that even apply this, or is it superseded by?
Well, so there's substantial use, and then there's 50% of structures.
Right.
Those are two different standards.
Well, I mean, but we talked about using square footage too at one point for this.
Yep.
And the case that you raised previously with, what if the grocery store came and nothing else happened? Would we wanna revisit that? I mean, and we'd say, well, I mean, it would be up to the board's discretion if that was in the spirit of the concept plan that was approved and the approvals to go with it, right? Isn't that what you would, say? Yeah, that would be my thought.
But is that the case with this condition or without this condition already? I guess what I'm trying to determine is, do we need this condition at all?
That's
We
what I was
have a
asking.
certain amount
Yeah.
of protection already, and is this just muddying things up or creating something that has no teeth anyway, so
I-
what's the point?
The provision in the site plan just refers to the site plan. I don't recommend removing it. You wanna tinker with the no less than 50%, if you wanna have some sort of substantial completion instead, I'm fine with that, but, this condition is not, to me, it makes sense in a project of this size. You know, it's not like I mean, to me, it makes sense to leave it in, even if it's unclear exactly how that's gonna be enforced. I mean, these things are subject to development cycles, as everyone knows. I don't know how you force somebody to complete something if they can't or won't. But I still think it's worth having in there because it reflects, the board's opinion that this project is anticipated to be built to completion.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Does anyone have an idea of if they wanna change the 50%, or I feel like, you know, we've talked about this point.
I think it makes sense to change it to total square footage of the project rather than structures, just because
Right, number of structures.
it's just, it's too
Whatever-
ambiguous, I guess, or,
I defer to staff and the board on that.
so I'm fine with that.
So 50% of
Because
proposed
it
square
doesn't
footage
equate,
approved by the decision.
The gazebo with the supermarket.
So in that, if we say total square footage of the project, that we're covered, that's everything added up, that's clear, right?
Yeah, because all you're saying is to come back and what's going on. So you said 50%. Are you,
I've just changed structures to square footage, if that's what the board wants.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the board's
Okay.
question, is it really worth having in there? My answer is yes,
Okay.
so.
And then did we wanna tack on at the very end for an additional 5-year period upon finding of good cause?
Yeah. I mean, that's really what we'd be looking for,
Right.
I would say. We'll
Sure, but I'm putting, except for good cause, as found by the board at the beginning as well.
Okay.
So we'll say it twice for good measure.
you have good cause to say it twice. Okay.
60, I thought, let's see, we talked about that was gonna be stricken because that was gonna be rolled into the new 56.
60?
That is what I have in my notes.
Yeah, that was Wayne's comment.
correct.
Okay.
I just saved this.
And 56.
Thank you. I'm on the next page, 63.
We had talked about removing
Right.
63 as well.
Right, because of
Oh.
the transient.
Well, it raises one question of, is there a concern about, should we consider creating a buffer for construction storage,
So subs for
100 feet
this,
from the property line or
Yeah.
something like that?
I do remember this discussion, I don't have my notes on that unfortunately, but I think the concern is, and I think it's a reasonable concern, that I mean, the purpose of showing the location is to have it not unreasonably close to the abutters. So if you, instead of this, you want to say, no construction, storage, or stockpiling area shall be located within X feet of the boundary, that to me would address the concerns, I think, unless I misunderstand the concern.
That's essentially what I'm getting at. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't wanna be overly restrictive, but this site is enormous. I feel like it should be doable
Okay.
without
So do you-
undue burden.
Do you want them to come in and see Rick or see Wayne about this, or do you, cause that's sort of what this anticipates?
To me, if it's more than 100 feet from the property line, I don't really care where it goes.
Okay, I guess the question is, do you wanna retain any aspect of this
It's 100 feet
condition that
from the line.
requires the board or Wayne to approve a plan before, showing
No.
where the sites will be?
Just make it an enforcement thing.
I personally don't think it's necessary. I think that if you wanted to institute something like the chairman recommended, I think that's more than sufficient.
Okay, so no storage.
It's gonna be a logistical
100
nightmare
feet's
to try to keep track of where things are moving on site.
Yeah.
And I don't
I
think.
think
it's
putting
really
some
necessary
protections in
to
for
do.
butters
Okay.
is important.
Is that enough?
And
Is that
So
100 feet?
no-
Is that
200 feet.
reasonable?
Sorry, what is it?
I'm just asking the
Okay.
board if the 100-foot
100 foot's just
feels
not very
right.
much.
Sorry?
100 feet doesn't seem like much.
If they're building something around the perimeter,
Seems like
they
too
might need
much
to be
or not?
closer.
No, not enough.
If they're doing work on the sides, we don't want them, make them. Or another way we could do it is, they could have things on the perimeter, but just for a really short amount of time, like you could.
Well, if they're
Or
actually
they could
building
ask
it, that's
for-
fine. This is about stockpiling, right?
Right, but if they're like have it there for a week, is that,
You could probably simplify it by just saying, no, construction, storage, or stockpiling areas shall be permitted within, let's compromise, 150 feet of the property boundary.
sounds good?
I like it.
Property line?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Good. All areas to be protected from encroachment from construction. Oh, okay. Are there any? There are. Should be marked on the ground.
Wetlands, the turtle area out back, all that stuff, right?
Sure. So you feel like these barriers are defined enough, Wayne? I mean, like,
Well, they're gonna have to be. I mean, they have certain limits, they have to, in there.
not just in plan, but the actual,
How
the
they'll be
detail, the
shown on
fence.
the site.
Any
whatever.
wetland barriers are gonna have to be demarcated
standard,
according to their conservation approval.
Yeah.
And DEP anyhow.
Hay
Turtle,
bales or
that-
whatever.
That's covered, turtles are covered over there.
So,
And I think we've already talked about, making sure that the barriers along the perimeter of the project for the residents are constructed first.
Yep. Okay. Uh, 65 has to do with limiting the occupation of a dwelling unit, right? Prior to construction and installation of security. I'm having a hard time reading this right now.
It's essentially saying, I think it's all the infrastructure has to be there before
Yeah.
anything's occupied.
Okay. Moving on to
Site
J.
improvements.
Whoops.
So that would include the offsite improvements as well. Set forth in the plans correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, improvements as set
Yeah,
forth.
yeah.
so in 66, I would take the word, it's kind of in the middle of the paragraph, the word uncompleted out of the phrase uncompleted offsite work, just under the modification that we made earlier, because the surety isn't for uncompleted offsite work, the surety is for offsite work. Right?
Strike this one.
Just strike the word uncompleted.
67, is that a, well, that's, I mean, should that just go up next to 65, or doesn't really matter?
It would make more sense to put it up there, I can look at it.
Can't flush the toilet till the sewer's hooked up.
Well, you can.
You really shouldn't.
Okay, those are the conditions.
There was one thing that I had mentioned last night. I know there was some discussion between the applicant and one of the abutters, Marie Gunderson, about some additional buffering to be included. Should that be a condition of the decision?
If the board wants it to be, I mean,
Just to ensure that
It's really
it doesn't
sort of falls
fall by
under
the
offsite
wayside.
improvements.
Yeah, I would think so.
if it's not called out specific, if you don't describe it particularly, I'm not sure I'm not sure that could be inferred from off-site improvements. 'Cause
No,
off-site-
it should be included, it should be defined under that, because it's actually on her property, not on the 129
Well,
side, right?
the thing is though, then, since off-site improvements, since there are requirements that pertain to the off-site improvements that wouldn't really apply to that buffering work, I hesitate to sweep it into off-site improvements, cause for example, that sweeps it into something that needs to be bonded, and it just, to me, that's confusing. So to the extent the board wants to make that a condition of the permit, I would just specifically set out what the board wants in a separate condition.
Are there other, I mean, do we know if there are other abutter agreements with the applicant? And is it our role, would it be the residents', responsibility to have a contract worked out, with their own, legal team? I mean, I would assume that if it was me, but, I don't know if it's really our place to to be involved in these other dealings.
Well, that one I just remember specifically
Yeah,
because
it
there was
was brought up
a
for sure.
discussion and.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think
but
my take
the
is-
others, I don't think we should really, since we don't have visibility into those, I agree with you, I don't think it's
I mean,
our-
I don't know, there might be other
Our
I
place,
think
agreements.
the
right.
other changes that were made in direct conversation with the butters were to things that are on site, for instance, the 8 and 12 fence.
I guess we wouldn't know,
Right, and.
Those fences
yeah.
are on the project property, though.
Right, that's
Yeah.
precisely my point.
but for the off-site things.
You know what we did in Keene, remember, we said that, because we had that issue with the abutters behind, on one side, and where they were gonna have, each one was gonna have an individual landscaping plan of sorts. And we said that, the developer would work with each of the abutters, on an individual plan, and we left that as part of the decision. And I think that we linked it to, certificates of occupancy at the end.
Well, we just don't know if they're working with every abutter. I don't know, I feel uncomfortable mentioning it at all.
Make a comment, an issue that Bill and I are dealing with right now. I believe there is a perimeter planting plan of the 3 sides of the property, including fencing on on the 2 sides. And I believe what we're referencing is a separate landscaping and planting plan that was prepared for one, relative to the concerns of visibility for one abutter. My recommendation for the record is that this board stay out of that. And that we don't get involved at all.
So
And
just,
that we clear that we're not involved at all.
just out of curiosity, if they then decide to renege on that,
It's not our agreement with the developer, it's a personal
That's right.
property owner's agreement with their new neighbor, if approved.
We're kind of embroiled in one right now.
That makes sense.
huh?
We're embroiled with one similar right now.
Where we tried to help and we ended up, no good deed goes unpunished.
I can see that.
No, I absolutely see what you're saying. I'm just trying, I mean,
That's
I'd be in favor
My
of
perspective.
leaving it out.
It's also, I mean, in a situation like this, the idea, I should say, the likelihood that somebody from the project is not before this board again at one point. And what's the likelihood of that? And if something like that had come up, I mean, it would ultimately.
Influence for future decisions.
Exactly. I mean, that would be my thought.
It's a soft consequence.
Barbara, I would just say for the agreements that have been made,
Yeah.
those will absolutely be followed through with. So there should be
Yeah,
no
How
question or
would we know
concern as to
what
that.
ones were made?
There's no other one.
Yeah, 'cause we're not-
Yeah, I don't,
Yeah.
you know, I have seen boards put in conditions pertaining to specific abutters, but I understand the arguments against it, and that's, I have no problem with leaving it out. It's, the board would not, the board should not be, or the staff should not be in the position of enforcing a private agreement, but apart from that, if the board of its own accord, you know, thought that this was something that should be part of the permit, the board could do it, but what I'm hearing from staff is not to do it, and I would certainly defer to staff on that.
And can we just insert something that says, you know, we make sure to be informed of any such eventuality?
I don't know, yeah, I don't know what that would give us,
Yeah.
Information?
but to do what
I
with?
feel like it's
Yeah.
none of
Yeah,
this.
I don't, I'm not sure having that information will be a good thing.
I mean,
I'm not remarking, this comment really has nothing to do with this particular applicant, but we know that in the past there have been applicants that have been, you know, underhanded. And I just think it'd be a good idea to at least be made aware.
If I could, I don't want the board to be in the position of policing a private agreement.
Right.
But again, if it were important enough, if the board thought it was enough of a concern to put a condition in the permit that required that landscaping, the board could do that, but again, I don't,
We haven't even seen these private agreements.
but I don't, the board.
You know what I mean?
I don't wanna put the board in the position of,
Well, we did actually get the drawing, right, during one of our meetings.
yeah, I'm reluctant to add, I mean, in my mind, it's almost like you're adding a private party, the abutter, you know, as a party to this entire agreement by including it in the off-site work if we were gonna put a
No,
condition.
no,
on
I'm
it.
just saying, what about just purely from a, you know, we will be informed?
I mean, I'm sure we would
I'm
be
sure we'll be
informed
informed.
in any event if it's not implemented. So, I mean, I just don't think an additional requirement or additional layer is necessary because I think everyone knows that if it's not implemented, we will be informed, so.
Although at the same time, like, obviously there's been an issue on another project that we have not been informed about.
I mean, it would be incumbent upon those abutters to inform us. I mean, you can't go around knocking on doors asking if they, you know, do you have an agreement and has the developer complied with it?
I just think knowing, I mean, this is the last thing I'll say on it, is that knowing the ongoing behavior of someone you're in a process with is an important factor, right? Like, imagine some other commercial transaction where like, you know, you're gonna loan someone money or borrow money or do business with someone and then you're not being informed that in fact, like, you know, they've just racked up, you know, $500,000 in bad debt. Like, it's part of the context. I don't know. I'm in favor of making sure that we're aware of activities surrounding this project.
No, I could see your point
Yeah, I
if
see your point.
we
And we're
weren't
gonna
actually
have
going.
ongoing interactions. There are gonna be, you know, design, or, you know, bits and pieces, special permits, plans, et cetera. Things are gonna continue to spin out of this project over the next couple of years after we've made this decision.
But I think as that process is ongoing,
you're saying you don't want it.
I'm sure there will be abutters that will be, you know, vocal in their desire to have X, Y, and Z done, or, you know, voice their concerns throughout the entire project. I just don't think we need another
Okay.
condition. That's just my opinion.
Again, it's
I'd
something
let it
that's
go.
available to the board, if it wants to incorporate a condition requiring compliance with
I
the
don't-
agreement, it can, but staff, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I think I glanced at it. I don't think, in my view, it's not part of what we're debating here, and I'm not considering that those proposals impact my view of the project at all at this point. In my view, it's adequate without those improvements. myself. So, I don't know, I'd rather leave it alone in terms of the language of the decision. Question, in terms of our 48, sorry to dive back in, there's some comments that some correspondence and so forth that I just wanna make sure we touch on. Barbara, you had, in terms of 48, sorry, there's 48, there's also, the, condition that you had proposed that, gives us the ability to revisit certain, aspects of the project,
Right.
minor modifications and so forth, like
Right.
what you described. You wouldn't describe the process of reviewing those as involving any kind of public hearing at all. It's a sort of a, certainly not using those words, right? And it really is, it sounds like from your description that it would be a board, process and at the board's discretion to take public testimony.
Right, well, if you're taking public testimony, I mean, that sounds like a public hearing. So you can include language in here, I mean, board retains the authority to require after public hearing reasonable and minor modifications to site lighting, et cetera. I think if you're gonna make a modification, even if it's a minor and reasonable one, that implies you're taking testimony. And that, if you're taking testimony, it's like, it's a public hearing.
But that means advertise 2
Sure.
weeks.
Sure,
Thought,
yeah, I mean, I think,
is that typical for minor modifications?
Is testimony the same as just public comment
yeah,
in a planning board meeting?
No, it's not. I don't see it as the same.
it could go either way.
I'm just clarifying
Yes.
what the process would be.
Minor modification, I thought we did not have to hold a
Okay,
hearing.
well,
Right.
Right.
that's probably,
That's-
sort of true under your bylaw, I guess I wasn't tying that language specifically to your practice, that was just the
Right.
language that I used in drafting it. So if you want it to be just, not a public hearing process, then we won't say public hearing. If you
Yes,
wanna
we-
tie it to your minor, is that in your site plan review? Minor modification?
It's in site plan.
That's just the language that I use to try to narrow the board's, the scope of what the board can look at, because if it gets too broad, that's a problem. So the language that I came up with was reasonable and minor, but the board could come up with other language if using the word minor confuses things. Because what I'm talking about is what the board was discussing the other day, dimming the lights somewhat, changing the hours of operation, changing the hours that the signs can be illuminated, that sort of thing. And I consider those fairly minor, divorcing that word from what it means in your bylaw.
Right. I guess.
Do you wanna tie it to whatever
Well,
process you have?
right. So when that word was used,
Yes,
that triggered in me
reasonably.
just my experience with other site plans and special permits that we've come
Yeah.
across where typically an applicant comes back and says, hey, we need to do it this way, not that way. We
Right.
decide, is it major or minor?
Sure,
If it's minor, we do it.
sure.
Usually, we talk about it, do it, there's no public hearing per se where there's an
Or you
advertisement
can
or
take
whatever.
comment.
Yeah,
Except,
of course, and I'm not suggesting that we don't wanna take public comment, I just wanna
Okay.
be clear about what we call it, or
sure, no, that.
what the
that-
expectation
Sure,
is.
and it's good, I
you know.
agree with you, and I'm glad we're clarifying it. But this might also, might come to the board's attention, not that the applicant wants to change, but that the neighborhood wants to change, and that.
Well, right, no, and I think the intent of what you were proposing is that this, it might be public feedback
Right.
that instigates this, comes to the
Correct.
board. It comes to the attention of the
Right.
board that something needs to be addressed, so then we instigate the process.
Right,
And my understanding is that the way you phrased it,
This is the
Yeah.
planning board.
that's limited to you used the word minor, but we have, there's a definition of minor or major.
Okay, so I understand, and that makes sense to me, so the board and staff should, I guess, think about whether you wanna tie it into the process that you have in the bylaw for site plan modification. That to me,
I think that
looking
makes
at
a
it,
lot of
strikes
sense,
me as a
doesn't it?
reasonable way to do it, but it's not the only way to do it.
Sure, and I guess that just begs the question, are we limiting ourselves in the crafting of that language
Right.
to minor modifications
Okay.
only? Is that the way that we
You
would wanna
could
do
take
it,
out,
if
I
that's
guess you could
appropriate?
take out, so not use the word minor, so that you're not tied to that process.
I guess I'd rather not use the language and
Okay.
then,
But what,
I mean, I suppose if, depending on what the change is, it becomes it's a discussion.
right,
I mean, right? We can't just change the decision
No.
down the road at our will.
right, but, Bill, can I see that again? I mean,
Now, this is,
right, but just looking at your planning board regulations, I mean, this seems like sort of a suitable framework for it, that you decide, you have public input, you can decide whether it's minor or major.
Do we
and if
think
it's-
there's any circumstance where changing the table or the lighting would be a major modification?
No, now that I think about it.
So I think
Do you
tying
want-
it to it actually
Yeah.
lends strength to it just being a board decision. Because that's how it's, I mean, minor modification is just a board decision.
So in other words, it makes sense just to tie it into the
And keep the word
regulation,
minor,
to the minor
Say-
modification.
Okay, so then,
in my mind.
So,
okay, shall,
maybe what we're saying is,
yeah,
the board is made aware of an issue,
right,
and I guess I don't know if there's a proposal attached to that issue, but
Right.
let's assume for a sec that there is. We wanna change this, or people wanna change this. Then we determine if it's major or minor, as we would typically with an applicant proposal. And then if we deem it to be minor, then we can make that change,
right.
I think is what we're saying.
Mhm.
If we deem it to be major, then we can't without a public hearing.
Yeah.
They'd have to submit and we'd have
Yeah.
to go through the entire process.
I mean, it seems to me that the intent of this whole NBOD process, which we're doing now with the you know, the concept plan and having a site plan that's consistent with the concept plan. At that point, once if it's completed, why wouldn't we just utilize our normal site plan review procedures?
Yeah.
Right,
We
but,
were, I mean, they're brand new, we just did.
but here's another, I guess, question. If an abutter, or the public, or someone brings an issue to the attention of the board, we deem that the remedy would be a major modification, unless the applicant applies to, essentially agrees to make that change, that it kind of stops there, right? Because they already own the right to the previous condition.
But if you
Am I-
retain the authority to.
Am I right? The only person that can apply for a major site modification is the owner of those permits. Is that
All right.
true?
Well, I guess the way I phrased the condition when I drafted it was the board retains the authority to require reasonable and minor modifications, so I wasn't really assuming that the applicant would have to make some formal application to the board. I guess I saw the neighborhood bringing it to the attention of the board considering whether it thought it was necessary after hearing from the neighborhood and the applicant, and making that change, making that
I'm just
minor
saying that,
change.
you know, the only time we've made a minor modification has been at the request
Yes,
of the
yeah.
owner of the
Right.
permit.
So why would it be any different if a year from now they wanted to make a modification, whatever it was? Why wouldn't they just follow our?
They would, but if the residents are bringing it up.
Right, but so what you're saying is, but what you guys are saying is that we need a vehicle for the residents So it's, the applicant is pretty much set under our existing.
Correct.
Right.
Right, so
Right.
why do we have the applicant at all? I think it sounds to me like you want something to address any issues that arose from,
That's, I think, what
Outside.
Barbara's intent was
Right.
originally.
Right,
I
that's
just
what
wanna
we're
make
talking
sure
about, right?
that.
Yes.
And we're talking about a limited set of issues.
Right.
That couldn't possibly be major,
Yeah, so,
in my mind.
no, right.
Right.
So why are we getting sidetracked onto it again?
Well,
because a discussion of minor, if you tie it to this provision, then you're possibly getting into the distinction between minor and major, and if it's major,
But aren't we defining these as minor right in the condition?
okay. All right, oh, well, hang on a sec. If we,
If it, I mean, are the types of types of issues that would coming up from an abutter?
Delivery hours and lighting. Those
I-
don't strike me as major.
I can't think of many others.
So we agree they're minor.
I wanna see I wanna reread the language. I would, I guess.
Well, like, I guess if people had problems with traffic, internal traffic or something, I don't know. I don't know if there's more, I mean, I don't think.
I was really thinking, from the discussion last night, the board wanted some way to be able to, and at that time I thought it would be sort of an administrative review, just to tinker with some stuff that came up in the O&M, you know, dimming the lights at 11 instead of, 12, going to 50% illumination at 11 instead of 12, that sort of thing. To have that sort. I'm not saying that any of the abutters can come in with a request to modify any aspect of the permit. That's not what I was talking about. I was just talking about the
Spending
scope,
way,
the
way,
narrow
way, way, way too
scope.
much time.
So
Well,
that's why.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? What?
No, I don't think we're spending too much time on this.
Okay.
I'm just concerned
Yes.
about what happens when something's brought to
Yeah.
our attention
Yeah.
and we think it's minor and they think it's major. Or
But aren't
we
pre-
all think it's major.
Aren't we predetermining that it's minor right now? Are we
But this
defining
is
it
if you
as
wanna
like
change it.
changes to this that have to do with the the table in the O&M or the site lighting?
Well, you're
Or
right. She's
minor.
referencing a specific set, a specific, it's not everything, it's these
Lighting.
parts of it.
Right, so,
Well, how-
do we define, do you wanna define these as minor? And say, and that way, just tie it to the minor?
I mean, if that's what we all think, if we think that tweaking those is minor, but tweaking it, I mean, I don't know.
Just those specific.
There's a lot, there's
We're
a
talking-
lot in those tables, that, in my opinion, there's a lot of stuff in there.
Well, the board could narrow it further, I use that as kind of shorthand, tables,
Yeah.
lighting on the site.
I
and
mean, shoot
activity.
me down, if we think that
No, I
if we
don't-
should retain, if these are all minor things, then.
Well, what would we do with an existing project, another project that we permitted? If Mill and Main right now, we just did a Mill and Main, they're doing an overhaul. If an abutter had an issue there, and how would we handle it? Okay, if it was noise, which we've had, okay, then it becomes a code enforcement issue.
Correct.
If it was, we haven't had a lighting problem, but if there was a lighting problem, I mean, how would we handle it right now? Well, yeah, I mean, so I don't see how the channels
Probably
would be
we
any
would
different.
never hear about it on that project. You
But-
would
right.
work it out between the.
And why would it be
the
different here,
butter.
though? That would be the other
I
question.
mean,
on
normally
that.
you would ask, if there was an issue with like, asking for a minor modification of a plan, normally the applicant would ask planning or engineering or DPW, do we consider this minor? And we'd give you a record, we'd tell the board, listen, they're asking to change from this type of a wall to that type of wall. In our opinion, that's a minor change, it doesn't need to come back to you. But there may be something that's, in our opinion, is more major, and we'd say, you know what, we can't make this call. This is a big change. It should go back in front of the board.
Right.
That's normally how I think we would handle it.
That's exactly how it would handle. That's what I'm saying. We don't, but we have that in our existing.
Yeah, that's how we do it now.
Right,
Bill's
right. I don't
point.
see why we'd have.
But we're talking about a very defined set of potential issues that we can agree, I think, are minor, and creating a process for that because it has direct impact on the abutters, and disregard whether it's a type of wall or any other normal change that goes through a normal process. We're talking about a specific, defined, different process.
What if we get it wrong, basically?
Right, well, or
We
what if we
don't
wanna be able to
know,
make a
right.
change,
We
right?
won't-
And it's
won't really
only
know,
around
right.
these very, very specific parameters.
So it's hours of operation, site lighting, delivery hours, uh, employee hours. I mean, these are just the areas, these are just the items in the, and trash pickup hours. I mean, those are the areas.
Don't get
So
me
if you
wrong.
wanna define those
No,
as
no, no, I'm
minor-
not taking anything wrong. No, no, this
I
is a
like
good
the idea-
process.
I like the idea of having the flexibility to adjust some of
Right.
this stuff.
Hours of operation is a little tough, though, I mean,
That's gonna be difficult.
I mean, if
when
they
you
already have
tenant
tenants in
that's
place,
the lease,
yeah.
that's-
I don't know if we can really touch that, I think when we sign off on that, we need to be okay with it.
I
think that's pretty
I-
standard.
I suggest that the board retain the authority to alter hours of operation, and if the board finds that it does not want to do so, it need not, but I suggest that the board retain that authority.
Yeah, why look at ourselves?
So do we refer to the entire table as a minor modification and then follow?
Right, the site lighting or the table is minor modification.
I mean-
That has its own process. It has nothing to do with any other, giant issue that might crop up in any other way.
I agree, and I mean, unless I'm not fully getting what your further concerns are, Greg, it's just, I don't know, you wanna broaden that scope as far as what?
Nope, I don't. I mean, I think, the scope seems defined well, I guess. I mean, council's advising that we retain it. If we try to use it, then we might hear otherwise, or we might get pushback, and then
Yeah,
we
well,
deal
that's-
with it then,
yeah, deal with it
I
then,
suppose.
But I think in order to, table it and put it to bed.
I mean,
you
it's
just-
only as good as it's actually defensible, down the road, and council suggests that it is, and so maybe we just retain it and then
And
deal
retain
with
it.
it piece,
Yeah,
but,
we retain it and then we deal with it on a,
Case by case basis.
Exactly.
Rely on the wisdom of, ourselves and future board members.
So I mean, that's fair. I guess, the only other thing I'll say is that I just feel a little awkward, or just wanna make sure that council agrees that it's defensible for there to be a process whereby the planning board can initiate minor modifications to a permit at our own initiation, without the applicant proposing those, because that's the only way I've ever seen it happen.
Okay, if it's retained the authority in the decision, number one, if it's narrow in scope, if they're reasonable, that, under those circumstances, yes, it's defensible.
Okay, well, we can give it a shot.
I'm just saying.
It's all gonna depend on what
Right.
whatever this particular issue is down the
Right.
road,
And I'm
if
not-
any,
I'm not suggesting that the board should be on the lookout, for issues. I'm just saying, this is a large project. The
Okay.
board, it's obvious from the discussion that board members are really,
But,
there's not agreement on exactly what all these impacts are gonna be. So,
okay,
once the project's up and running, then you'll have a better idea.
okay, thank you for clarifying. I guess just to wrap that up,
Okay.
there, could be, and, in my opinion, should be, public input. However, we shouldn't use the word public hearing
Okay.
in relation to minor issues, which we're talking about. The scope of this would be minor issues tied right to minor modification, as defined already in our bylaw.
As opposed to meeting.
Which
And we can
in-
always have public comment.
In the past, for minor modifications, we've had plenty of public comment, but it is not a public hearing, the way that we just finished one with all of the restrictions and time constraints and all that stuff.
And we found in a lot of cases that it's more efficient for the whole, it turned out not to be as big of a deal as it was originally thought, or sometimes it is, and that gives you that advantage too. I think that's a good way to do it.
And that, you know, any major modification follows a process that already exists.
I'm not, yeah, I was just not even gonna refer to a major modification, because that would be the applicant, I'm not,
And it already
I don't-
exists in the bylaws, right?
it exists for the applicant to come in, and I'm not suggesting
It's applicant
that,
initiated.
that someone other than the applicant would initiate
Okay.
any changes to the permit. So the board, as I think the board would find acceptable, the board retains the authority to require reasonable modifications or reasonable minor modifications. Do you want the word minor or not?
Sorry, can you start over
Okay,
one more
the
time?
board retains the authority to require reasonable minor modifications to lighting on the site and activities conducted under section 3 of the O&M to mitigate the project impacts on the neighborhood. Such modifications may be made upon something public comment and shall not entail a public hearing, if you wanna make that explicit.
Upon receipt of appropriate public comment.
Following, maybe made following receipt of, I don't know if there's better language
So
in,
one complaint, then this is, you know what I mean, that's,
in the, if you already have the language
Dangerous, I feel
in,
Sorry, say that again.
I mean, any complaint by anyone, it could be on our
But we don't have to do
You don't
anything.
have
But we don't have to initiate.
Okay.
We can, it's our decision.
Okay,
it's your discretion to even entertain
okay.
any of this. I'm just saying you retain the authority. You might have a request by someone to discuss this and to consider it. You don't have to do that. I'm just saying it's within the board's, you retain the authority to do so based on your exercise of judgment, if it merits hearing, and then if it merits a change.
Do we add at the board's discretion?
I think that's implicit, but retains the authority at its discretion, at its sole discretion.
I like sole discretion.
Okay, so the board retains the authority at its sole discretion to require reasonable minor modifications to lighting on the site and activities conducted under section 3 of the O&M to mitigate project impacts on the neighborhood. Such modifications shall be made following receipt of public comment, period, or, and shall not entail a public hearing, if you want that additional language.
Perfect.
All right, okay.
You got that all right?
Yes, I do.
All those read.
All right, guys, I know it's, shoot. It's 10.
I think we should talk about this particular issue for at least another 30 minutes.
All right. This, I mean, this is it here. This is our shot, so.
I'm sorry, just, my instinct is to interject levity. I don't mean disrespect anybody or the process in any way.
I'm a levity guy.
Okay.
Findings,
That,
any additional special permits, when it
okay.
occurs,
Do you wanna go back to the findings and I'll,
Yeah.
I did have one more thing I wanna run by you, guys.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear. We talked about the findings that I have, I did make the changes that the board asked for last night, I believe I got them all. However, we didn't get, completely, finished. There were two things I added for, clarity and, I wanna make sure the board understands it. I touched on one earlier regarding, we defined, what the parking and, waivers were.
Yep.
You'll see it on your sheet there, the worksheet. And the one additional finding we have to make for parking study, for, waiver relief for parking studies, we just have to we have to find that there was a demonstration made by the applicant that there was no possible way, to provide the parking required, or that doing so would render the project infeasible, et cetera, et cetera.
Didn't we talk about this earlier in the meeting?
Right, so that's what I talked about, right, so
Okay.
that was, okay, that one we got. What we didn't, was it, yeah, we did, I did go over
Yeah.
the second, okay. I didn't go over the second one. Second thing is, In the NBOD for uses permitted by special permit, okay, there's a couple of additional things that it's going to be, I wouldn't say it's implied, so I think it's going to be worth going over real quick. But these are, in addition to the normal criteria for a special permit, there's three other criteria that the board has to find for, this would only be for the drive-through use, this would be for the multifamily use, and it would be for the CCRC. And that would be that the proposed use or structure is consistent with the concept plan, okay, approved by town meeting. 2, cumulative impacts from the proposed use or structure, including but not limited to impacts on traffic, public infrastructure, will be sufficiently minimized, mitigated through the off-site improvements and on-site improvements. And 3, that their proposed use or structure, when completed, will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the NBOD, and not otherwise inconsistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning bylaws.
So that'll be added to this?
Well,
Those are additional required findings that the board has to make in order to grant those 3 special permits. So for,
Right, we have findings here, so they'll have to be added to this.
correct, yes, these findings will have to be added to the decision. So it needs, the board needs to consider, and this actually will, assuming the board proceeds to a vote, I prepared an outline that goes through and has the board determine whether it can make each of these findings, because it needs to do that before it
So
grants a
these
special
NBOD
permit.
findings are in the outline?
They're in the outline, correct, but because we didn't talk about them yesterday, I didn't want to wait until the board goes to vote in order to bring it up and for the board to
Thank you.
have, if only a succinct discussion, some discussion of whether it believes these criteria are, whether it can make these findings.
one question, Barbara, the board asked.
Yes.
That's I did or something. That when we were talking about this, we've gone through, the board has been through the proposed findings. Assuming that the board agreed with them as they're written here.
As amended yesterday, right?
Yes, that's
Yes,
correct.
yes.
As amended yesterday. Is there a reason that they need to go through all these? Do they read them out loud, to read them in the record, or we just would add these to the decision, and then when the decision's executed, it would be?
Well, it's the same as yesterday. I think the board should, have a brief discussion of these as you've set them out. Then the same as the other findings, those findings will go in the decision. The reason being, the board, in finding that assuming it finds that it can grant a permit, you have to do something more than just parrot the language of the bylaw criteria. You can't just say, we find that the structure is consistent with the concept plan. You have to say something else, and that something else is the findings, and that's what needs to go in the decision, are these findings. Because otherwise, if there were an appeal, for example, the judge says, you need to do something more. You can't just put the same language that's in the bylaw in the decision and show that you've really evaluated it.
I agree, and wouldn't it be, that's what we've done in this original
Correct.
worksheet.
Yes.
However, the NBOD one is so narrow, so is it consistent with the approved concept plan? at
Like
town
any
meeting?
What other
other-
languages around that?
For any criteria in the bylaw, I'm gonna ask the board to make some finding.
Very consistent with
I'm trying to protect the board.
I hear you
I'm trying to
100%.
craft a decision that just says, we find that the proposed use or structure, when completed, will be in harmony with the intent of the bylaw. That's not good enough. You have to make some findings, and that's what Bill's drafted. So that's why I'm being a stickler about some findings. But yes, if the board agrees to those, then they can go, that's what ends up in the decision. Or the board can craft different, can craft its own findings.
I
like these findings?
The findings are fine.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not trying to torture the board, but it just, before it votes, I would like the board to just have a succinct review and affirmation.
We have to go through the lighting, channel, reverse channel.
Well, that is still outstanding. I mean, we need to decide what version of the lighting, special permit we're gonna vote on,
Right.
right? I think, is there anything else?
I have to eat, I'm dying.
I think that was it.
And the times, did we settle the
We already,
times for
we
which stores?
covered that already.
Settled
The
times,
O&M, so you're talking about the O&M.
in
Yeah, but we-
table
but we
3.
covered it.
Yeah, so I mean, I just,
The changes that if you want, just
I think it
very
wouldn't-
briefly,
I think that wouldn't hurt an hour at some point, just to
the
make
changes
sure.
that I have to
Yes.
table 3 are under grocery store area, site
Yep.
lighting,
Yep,
on at dusk, dim to 50% from 11:30 PM,
Yep.
that's the change, to 1 AM.
yes,
Delivery hours, again, under grocery store area, grocery and frozen food, 10 AM to 9 PM.
right.
I had another change
Yeah, I
to
did see
site
that.
lighting, some
So
more
I
notes
yeah, I
on
was
there.
gonna circle back to that. I
Or one
have,
open.
so all on from 5 AM,
Oh,
only if business open. That's
Thank
what
you.
I have written down.
Yep.
Then the 10 AM to 9 AM on the delivery hours.
is that it?
Right.
Yes,
Okay, so it's three
And then the
three
trash pickup
points.
change.
trash
right?
pickup.
Four things. Saturday, trash pickup Saturday, 8 AM to 6 PM.
I have that as well.
And I have one we missed, we have, for delivery, compressor off at the site border.
That wasn't in the table, right?
Yeah, that's not really a table change though, right? That's,
Where does that go? Where did that go?
And
'Cause we had talked about that, we had talked about the
Yeah.
Jake
I had it
break,
under
we talked
Gloria.
about.
but the Jake break I thought is not relevant, right?
You said
We-
It's a highway speed thing.
So we're gonna put that.
We put,
Just in
Jake
case
breaks
you
are
go like
prohibited within 500 feet of property line. Backing indicator should be switched off as legally permitted and equipment permitting.
This is O&M stuff?
I think it would still go in here, cause this is describing, you know, the quantity of deliveries, the hours of deliveries, how they're delivered. I think you could just,
I hesitate to, I would rather make that as a condition because.
Just a condition and then the
This
applicant
isn't-
has to implement it somehow.
Has to comply,
Yeah.
he has to comply with it.
Okay.
But
So compressor.
I don't wanna tinker with this
Yeah.
to add other
Fine,
substantive
yeah.
requirements.
Okay.
Good point.
So,
I'll just capture it.
yep. So then really it's really just the signs, the sign lighting.
Where are we on signage, on sign lighting? The reverse channel lit would be one option. Well, excuse me. We're going to require the reverse channel lit facing Parker Street. That's the halo.
Interior site, we were still debating whether or not to be reverse channel.
Interior site is
Or
really
channel.
where it was, sorry, let me just go back to,
Yeah,
is it E?
I just wanna
Just
look
it's
for my
all
notes on
in
this.
here. It's not in here on E.
So do the board, for the I have a question mark, do we just decide we want reverse channel facing Park Street?
Yes.
Yes. There was one other thing.
Box signs are not permitted.
Right, got that.
Box signs not permitted. Didn't we decided to tie the building's signage lighting to hours of operation?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm,
Well, that
I'm
that
not
was-
for that, but I put out,
That
I
was a
will go
point of,
for it.
that was a point of discussion.
Yeah.
but-
I think there's adequate lighting throughout the site to, to support that. If they close, they turn their sign off.
yeah, it's not my aesthetic preference, but, you know, it's the majority.
You don't write that.
I think. Hours of
Yeah,
operation.
hours of operation.
I think that's the way I'd like to go. Require them all to be dimmable. And then the last piece is the reverse channel versus the channel. And reverse channel,
Yep.
I think. Channel.
Channel.
Okay.
I mean, we could discuss it further,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think the idea was to poll everyone tonight to.
Which we've now done.
There's definitely other things I feel less strongly about than this. I really would ask the board to support what was recommended, and I think the channel lights,
I merely restate that I think we will
Yeah.
never have another shot at controlling sign lighting in this town again.
and I'll restate that I think that light pollution is worse with the reverse channel lit, and I think, aesthetically,
If it's worse, wouldn't it be easier to see because there'd be more light?
I think the spillage is not controlled, because it goes above where the letters
But it's
are,
reflecting off a wall. It's already diffused and diffracted.
and into the sky.
I think we settled on, I mean,
Yeah.
we polled.
I agree. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
I think we have to be cognizant that our chance of controlling it forever after is gone.
Respectfully
Sure, I agree with
disagree.
that,
You know, again, I'll go back to my comments of yesterday. I think the site is unique enough in character and, you know, how the buildings are placed in relation to the street. And just where else could, I mean, I think development in the future, especially larger scale commercial development or even small scale is kind of limited with the available land that we have in
Mill and
this
Main.
town. Well, Mill and Main is already, it's there, and it's a different location. I would argue it's a different character altogether, so.
I'm just saying the retail tenants are gonna want it there too, and they're gonna come back, and we're not gonna be able to stop it.
Well, we're setting a precedent with the reverse channel for anything facing
The street.
the street or, houses across the street.
Right, but not
That would
houses
be-
on the side.
Right, yeah.
No, and that's fine, and I'm not saying, I'm not trying to dissuade anybody, I think we've all made our opinion voiced, I'm just talking about, I think, a downstream consequence of what is being decided.
Well, I think that I feel like I can support the channel lit version. It's a tough one because I feel it's like two versions of it. An affirmative vote. It's not A or B. I feel like if either were proposed, I'd probably support either. But knowing what's been proposed by the applicant, I think I can support the channel lit sign. That's that, I think, right? That's,
That was it,
I
right?
think we should vote on
Is that a
on
condition
particular
too,
one.
or-
Well, I guess that would be,
It's part of the special
it's part of
permit for
E.
the,
Yep, Bill and I were just discussing where that should go, I think probably in E, but it could also be a condition, it could also be within the body of the permit. It'll be equally, if we need to have some sort of placeholder in the body of the decision, all sign lighting is subject to the provisions of section
just-
E, we can do that.
Yeah,
Next
that's
E.
what we have now. I mean, why don't we just put it in C?
In C?
There's a section now, C signage
Oh,
lighting.
in
Within
the-
E.
Within,
within
sorry,
E, sorry,
sorry.
yes.
C, comma,
Yep.
E.
E, C, Exhibit E,
Right,
section I, section 1C, signage lighting.
And there would be 3 additional conditions.
reverse channel facing Parker Street, box signs not permitted, building signage, light,
Tied to
hours of operation.
Hours of operation.
All to be dimmable, and then whatever the board is deciding on the
Channel lit.
channel lit.
Internally illuminated with face. Lighted channel signs. Isn't that what it says now, I guess? Under the last paragraph of individual letters or logos shall be composed of internally lit individual cut letters, text symbols, or individual registered logos, blah, blah, blah.
Mr. Chairman, are you in E?
I'm at the very end of E, there's
Okay.
a paragraph kind of floating there at the end,
Yeah,
which
I've lost my E, so.
it might, that last paragraph seems like that wants to
Sure.
become part of signage lighting.
That makes sense. I
That
haven't-
section, signage lighting, and also include the bits that you had already, spoke of.
We were gonna add.
So in C, yep, signage lighting. Yep.
I have to admit that I'm still a little lost on what needs to be found in the findings. Not what, but how we capture it. I mean, we have this language, right? These are, I'm assuming that this language that's been proposed
Right.
That doesn't include the MBOD. Bill has other language for that, right?
Well, that's correct.
as
And that's in the
amended,
back
but
of
that,
the-
that this language constitutes adequate language, I guess, to be our findings, right? If we, assuming
Yes.
we agree with it,
If
right?
you
I mean,
agree
this
with
is,
them, or if
this
you
is-
want to tinker with them, I would, yes, these.
but this
would-
is adequately, custom language, I guess, versus the sort of rehashing of the
Yes.
Yeah.
code.
Correct, exactly. So I think this does a good job, a more than adequate job of being specific, not just parroting the bylaw.
Okay,
And then
so-
those would become findings in the decision.
So, we need to make sure we agree with this stuff, but that's what we are, to,
We reviewed this already. right?
we have, right? So I'm stating, I guess, or, confirming that we're in agreement with the findings.
Yes.
Now, as I mentioned, I've been provided with a script, which is very helpful. And I'll just, march through it very briefly and see how that,
So is this a
Right.
dry run, or are we
Yeah,
actually doing
that's
this
fine.
now?
I just wanna make sure that the board addressed all of the proposed conditions that different board members had, or that were, that we've talked about. I think, Mr. Chairman, you had a proposed condition.
Sure.
So
I guess we never
if you-
confirmed
the
that
lead-
we
the
would
water.
like
I
to
thought we already
include
put
that.
put that in, yes?
Yeah, we did.
The
Oh, we
lead
did?
one?
As long as everybody's
The
cool with
water
that,
usage,
it's in.
Okay, then that's in.
I
Alright.
believe we were all.
And
in
Sam
agreement.
had,
And then if there's, I just wanna make sure before
Yep,
you just go into the script, just
absolutely.
to make sure if
Well,
everyone.
I guess one of the other proposals, I guess, for dealing with this is that we do, after a motion is made, we do have an opportunity for final discussion, right? And that, in a way,
Sure.
if a motion is made, that hones in on the scope of whatever that discussion should be, and it gives us some clarity as to what we're talking about, and at the same time, tease up each one of these votes, right? Which I think the overwhelming, in my estimation,
Right.
most of them will be ready to vote on, I think.
I think so. I mean, if the chair wants to have discussion after a motion and a second, that's certainly appropriate. If you're saying that's a good place to pull in any last minute, or just revisiting any of the conditions, that's fine. Conceptually, I just thought,
Sure.
just before the board goes into this, I think this would be the right time to pause and think about that. And it may be that there isn't anything left, I just I thought maybe it's time to take a breath.
Well,
and-
I'll do a quick recap. We've gone through the draft conditions, we've
Yep.
gone through the operations. I believe we've gone through the engineer's comments, we've gone through resident comments.
Okay.
We've gone through the findings once. Have we gone through the findings adequately?
I feel like we spent a good bit of time on it last night.
Yes.
I would say yes.
I know that some findings were added. I didn't hear anything that I disagree with. I also, from my understanding, understand that the findings are also reiterated in the process of voting,
That is correct.
right? So we will have an
Yes.
opportunity to listen to them one more time and confirm.
We have to read all the findings during the voting?
That's correct, so, for each of the, for all of the special permits, you need to make a finding that the adverse effects won't outweigh the beneficial impact. For the 3 use permits, you also have to make 3 specific findings under the NBOD bylaw, that Bill alluded to earlier. For the parking special permit, there's a required finding, or one of 2 alternative required findings. There aren't any additional required findings for a signed special permit. And then the site plan approval, you have to make a finding that under the NBOD bylaw, that the site plan substantially conforms to the concept plan. So each of these findings is in the script, so that
Yep.
you reference all of them and
But,
consider all of
but
them.
they're referenced in the motion.
Yeah, I'll read a sample of the motion. Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny or grant a special permit for the proposed multifamily use under the findings as discussed and modified and subject to the conditions in the draft decision as modified by the board during deliberations. So that pulls in the findings, it pulls in the conditions, it
We don't
pulls
actually
in.
have to read them.
Okay. We don't have to read this with
No,
each
not
motion.
that, no. I
Oh,
want you
okay,
to-
that's what I was asking about.
Oh, no.
And everyone was like, yeah, and I was like, oh my god.
No, not the fine, no.
Okay.
No, I'm asking, the board should ask itself whether it can make each of these required findings, yes or no,
Okay.
and go through all of them. I do want, the board to have considered, again, succinctly, the additional findings drafted by the planner. If you feel you've reviewed it enough, then that's fine.
Let's give it a minute,
That's right.
everybody.
To review
Because we are not gonna read these
You're
into
not
the
gonna read
record.
those, so,
We're referencing,
We went through
this
them in detail
becomes,
last night.
no, some of these are new. Some of these are new for the NBOD ones, right, Bill?
No.
we did go through them in detail last night. Let's
The
give it a minute.
NBOD is in the back, I didn't have it, on the very last page.
We have to come up with our own findings.
Well, that's the thing that we're saying. Is there a way, just for the
Yep.
board, that they could craft, that these,
Parking is the other one.
the findings for these special permits,
Right now?
do it in mass? No, for
Yes,
these,
yes.
for the NBOD ones.
You
I mean,
could
because
do
it's
the
just.
same, yes, you could have the same findings, applying to these, unless there's something really peculiar that you wanna call out about, any of these 3 uses. I'd be okay with that.
I don't have any issues with the findings.
Nor I.
I don't either.
Okay. Sorry, guys, just wanted to, so the findings, those are clear, we'll now reference them.
Do you wanna create, are you gonna have them create additional findings for each of these? 3?
Okay, I'm gonna move into
Wait, is that what you want?
the voting portion of the evening.
Hold on. It's like sidebar here.
Full disclosure,
Okay.
I'm just,
Oh, yeah.
as long as we're cool,
Okay.
we'll wait for these these guys.
Okay, so we didn't have the opportunity to have
Right.
specific findings.
Yeah, I just didn't know if we had to do our own findings for this page, that's what I was gonna ask.
So,
For the last, because it's,
It's verbatim on, was
Well,
verbatim.
the NDOD is one piece, but the other ones are, like, we didn't have any findings about consistent with the concept plan or, you know, traffic, I guess. I don't, that's just, that was a piece I didn't know, I think we'll talk about that. If we need to come up with our own for these guys.
well, but the same way we had something
Yeah,
additional.
I think that part was confusing to everyone.
I got a couple. We can pull them down. Got a little chart here.
Well, are you writing the bylaw or if you're writing a decision? Oh.
Because we've said 100 times that it has to be consistent with the concept plan already, you know, I mean, it seems, as a matter of fact, the site plan has to be consistent with the concept. So it's kind of superfluous.
So, right,
Just my.
so Barbara,
Yes.
I'm reading your script.
yep,
For all 5 special permits, in order to grant, the board must find, under section 10.442, that the adverse effects,
yep.
Those findings are captured already, right?
Well, for purposes of the vote, I want the board has not yet made a finding, has not yet made an affirmative statement about all these findings. That's what the board needs to do. Before it votes, it has to,
Vote on the findings?
well, it has to agree that it can make the finding.
We reviewed the findings. We don't have any proposed changes to the findings. Is it not in the same category as
It's-
all the other language that
it's-
we've reviewed? Or
it's-
do we need to go a step farther and approve the findings?
Okay, so I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. So the bylaw, to grant the special permit, you have to find that the criteria are met. So that's why there's the chart with listing the criteria. To have a really solid decision, you have findings that elaborate on or give the particular reasons why the criteria are met.
Yep.
But the board hasn't yet said, I mean, I guess what you're saying is by going through those, right, going through those findings, the board has effectively said that the criteria are met?
I think so, but if we need to actually,
I guess, I mean, I know it
you know,
makes,
make a motion and vote on, that, then we will. Or is that approval kind of captured in the vote on that special permit?
I guess
It's a vote before a vote.
My
sort of,
recommendation,
or-
it is asking the board, and I'll just use the first one on page 1 as an example. It may seem wordy, it may seem elaborate, but to me, it's the best way of doing it, just to say, based on review of the application, under section 10.4.2, does the board find the adverse effects of the proposed use will not outweigh its beneficial impacts? And then there's nodding and the board agrees, then you go on to you say yes or no, then you go on to the next. Certainly if the chairman at his discretion doesn't wanna go through the whole script, I certainly understand, but.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to, I'm just trying to understand what I have to do, and, so, I'm gonna say this, and you guys nod, or agree,
say-
or if you,
yeah, just
or
yes.
not.
And if you want it later on, after one of them, if you wanna take some shortcuts, I could live with that, but to me, it's worth 5
I will
minutes.
follow the script, I just wanna, I'm not making a motion, right? I'm just
Before
making
you
a
move-
statement.
Right, so before you're asking the board, if based on its review of the special permit criteria under section 10.4.2, does the board find X, yes or no?
Okay.
Then, based on review of, under section 9.3.7, does the board find X, yes or no?
Okay,
And then, after you make all those findings, if the board finds that all these criteria are met, then it can vote. To me, it really shouldn't vote unless it finds that the criteria are met.
okay,
And so I agree that it's sort of implicitly found that the criteria are met, but I like explicitly finding that the criteria are met, which is what puts you in a position to move that the board, if it finds that the criteria are met, grant the permit.
okay. Let me take a crack at this.
Okay, so starting with the multifamily use special
Okay.
permit.
One by one. So, understanding that we are using the criteria of section 10.4.2 of the bylaw, that adverse effects of the proposed use will not outweigh its beneficial impacts to the town or the neighborhood in view of the particular characteristics of the site. Do we find that the application for a special permit for multifamily use meets these criteria?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Do we find that the application for the continuing care retirement community meets the criteria of 10.4.2?
Okay, you can do it that way, I guess. I was gonna have you
I'm
do
winging
one-
it. What-
one-
I'm-
I guess
I'll
the
take
way-
advice,
the
but
way- The way I'd structured it is that you're doing one permit at a time. So for each permit, you just did, if you look on page one, you just answered the question, the board found that the special permit, that the project meets the special permit criteria of 10.4.2, then I would, in the script, you move on to
Yep.
the other criteria for the same permit. So go through
Get
all
through the permit
all
rather than the
page.
criteria.
just do one permit at a time, I think is the best way to do it. So, does it?
Okay, so, all right,
So on the bottom of page one, based on review of the application under section 9.3.7,
Got
the
it.
board finds.
okay.
And then